Chapter 1160. Rumble. The earth quaked, and in the distance, the majestic city of Talas fiercely shuddered as an enormous energy appeared in everyone's perception. That energy was so vast that it felt like a boundless ocean in everyone's perception. It was enough to make any cultivator pale in comparison. Even a powerful existence like Kateba instantly became insignificant in the face of this energy. This is Abu Muslim, Ibak, Ziad, and Huashu all grimaced as they sensed this tide of energy erupting from beneath Talas. Even Kateba's sword chi froze for a moment. This is the myriad Rakshasa earthen stronghold formation. As Dalwin Ruozan looked into the distance, his eyes went wide. There was only one object of this level of energy beneath the walls of Talas. The myriad Rakshasa earthen stronghold formation that had supported the city of Talas for thousands of years. But this energy had always been extremely stable, and it was impossible to sense its flow. This sort of berserk state should never have occurred under normal circumstances. These bastards, just what did they do? For a moment, Dalwin Ruozan felt an intense sense of unease. But as if responding to his thoughts, the earth began to rumble, and in a few short moments, the tremors had reached an astonishing level. Everyone could sense that the energy of the myriad Rakshasa earthen stronghold formation beneath Talas was traveling with astonishing speed through a special channel, surging through the earth to the feet of Wang Chong and the evil emperor, where it resonated with the 9-dragon blood war banner in the hands of the black-armored guard. In a flash, the energies of Wang Chong, the evil emperor, the chief of Wuxia, the black-armored guard, and Gao Xianji began to swell, fusing together into an enormous formation. At the center of this formation was not the black-armored guard with the 9-dragon blood war banner, but Wang Chong standing across from Kateba. Not good. Kill him. A heaven-shaking roar resounded through the sky as Abu Muslim immediately began to attack Wang Chong. At almost the same time, Ibak, Huashu Huaitsong, and Ziad also began to frantically attack Wang Chong, their faces filled with worry. No one knew what the Tang people had done, nor did they know what they had done to the myriad Rakshasa earthen stronghold formation, but there was no question that all of this had been premeditated. Wang Chong and the remnants of the Tang dynasty had never truly intended to retreat to the western regions. Everything they had done, whether it was their escape or their order for the army to abandon Talas and flee to the western regions, had been to confuse them, to lure them into this place. Abu Muslim, Kateba, have the two of you finally realized? Alas, it's too late. Wang Chong's voice resounded in everyone's ears, and then Wang Chong's energy began to swell. Through the 9-dragon blood war banner, Wang Chong had simultaneously absorbed the energy of the evil emperor, the chief of Wuxia, Gao Xianji, the black-armored guard, and the myriad Rakshasa earthen stronghold formation beneath Talas. This energy was extremely dense and almost tangible, surging through Wang Chong's pores and limbs like a tide and madly pouring into his body. This was an enormous energy that Wang Chong had never encountered before, and no energy in Wang Chong's life had ever been able to compare to it. Propelled by this energy, Wang Chong's cultivation reached an inconceivable level. The great Yin-Yang heaven creation art rumbled through his body, and the image of the sun and moon reached an astonishing level. Under the illumination of the sun and moon, Wang Chong's energy soared. In the blink of an eye, he had not only surpassed Abu Muslim, but even the Arab war god Kateba had become insignificant before Wang Chong. Buzz! Kateba's pupils constricted, and a look of extreme apprehension appeared on his face. No one knew how Wang Chong had managed to do this. The myriad Rakshasa earthen stronghold formation that had remained untouched for the past 1,000 years had actually been used on a proper battlefield. Kateba was powerful, but not so powerful that he could single-handedly contend against the entire myriad Rakshasa earthen stronghold formation. Seeking death, Kateba's expression chilled as his massive sword, God's might, shot forward, fusing together with the sword chi, and then slashed at Wang Chong's head, moving even faster than Abu Muslim and Ibak's attacks. Kill them! Ibak's shrill cries resounded over the battlefield. Ibak hoped to use this massive number of Arab cavalry to charge at Wang Chong, the evil emperor, the chief of Wuxia, and Gao Xianji, weakening their attacks. But even so, it was too late. Ibak finally realized that around Wang Chong and the evil emperor, the divine martial army, the divine prison army, the dragon stallion army, and the Tongluo cavalry had at some point fused with Wang Chong's forces to form an enormous formation for the first defense line. These top-class armies of the Tang dynasty had used the excuse of holding off the Arab cavalry and holding off the retreat of the Tang people. They had worked together with Wang Chong, the evil emperor, and the Nine-Dragon Blood War banner to form this formation that could communicate with the myriad Rakshasa earthen stronghold formation. All of this had been accomplished silently. When Daluan Ruozhen had tricked and defeated Wang Chong, Wang Chong's forces had used this opportunity to retreat and successfully lure Kataba into this ambush. Kataba, accept your fate. Today, this will be the place of your burial. Wang Chong's loud and impassioned voice resounded through the universe. Rumble. Without the slightest hesitation, Wang Chong communicated with the Nine-Dragon Blood War banner and unleashed the energy that the myriad Rakshasa earthen stronghold formation had accumulated for thousands of years. Boom! Behind Wang Chong, the towering and imposing city of Talas that had stood for centuries suddenly began to shudder. It was like a pair of invisible hands were gripping the city of Talas and causing it to sway. The moment Wang Chong attacked, the massive city of Talas collapsed. At almost the same time, the earth quaked and mountains crumbled. There was a boom like the beginning of the universe, and a vast and unimaginable energy struck Kataba, like a meteor crashing into the earth. Translated by Hypersheep 325. Kataba's dreadful sword chi only lasted for a few moments before being pulverized by the most enormous flood of energy in history. After shattering Kataba's sword chi, the destructive earth element energy struck the Arab war god, sweeping up all the people behind him, including Abu Muslim, Ibak, Huashu and Ziad. Even the charging Arab cavalry were engulfed by the raging tide of energy. Amidst the rumbling sounds of explosions, numerous shrill and miserable cries seemed to be especially ear-piercing, and in the blink of an eye, countless severed limbs were tossed into the sky. The charging Arab warhorses could even dent steel, but in the face of this destructive flood of earth element energy, countless Arab warhorses and their steel armor were torn to shreds like they were made of paper. Boom boom boom. Wave after wave of explosions erupted around the Nine-Dragon Blood War banner as the center, and the dense ranks of Arab cavalry charged into this area. In order to prevent the Tang people from escaping, 6,000 to 7,000 Arab cavalry had gathered at the very front of the battlefield. But when Wang Chong activated the energy of the myriad Rakshasa earthen stronghold formation and unleashed it, all these elite cavalry were instantly obliterated, their corpses obliterated. Explosions resounded through the heavens, and a thick cloud of dust soared tens of thousands of feet into the air. Amidst the smoke and dust, countless pieces of rubble shot out in all directions, hitting the ground and the steel walls. It was as if those were not rubble, but sharp arrows. Nay, at this moment, countless warhorses neighed in alarm, and many well-trained cavalry were thrown off their horses. The entire battlefield was in a state of panic. Everything had happened too suddenly. No one had expected that the Tang people, who were at the end of their rope and could only flee in panic, would use this move at the final moment. 6,000 to 7,000 Arab cavalry had been vaporized, and it was unknown whether Kataba, Abu Muslim, Ibak, and Huashu were still alive. This is impossible. In the distance, Daluan Ruozhen's eyes widened, and his entire body seemed to have been struck by a bolt of lightning. Impossible. This is impossible. Dust churned in the distance, but Daluan Ruozhen felt like he had been plunged into an icehouse. His heart chilled. If one looked carefully, one would even notice that his hands, hidden deep within his sleeves, were fiercely trembling. That calm and composed face of a commander had long ago turned ghastly pale. Daluan Ruozhen had never imagined that Wang Chong, despite the Tang dynasty clearly having lost, would turn around and kill him. For a time, Daluan Ruozhen believed that victory was assured, and that Wang Chong would never be able to reverse the situation. But now, everything was proceeding in the direction that Daluan Ruozhen least hoped for. Chapter 1161. In the distance, Wang Chong, the evil emperor, Gao Xianji, and the black-armored guard were also nervously watching. Behind them, the towering city of Talas had vanished, leaving behind only a crumbling wall and a roiling cloud of dust, echoing the pillar of smoke rising from Wang Chong's group. Without the support of the myriad Rakshasa earthen stronghold formation, this ancient fortress had completely vanished. The city of Talas that not even the Arab behemoth army had been able to destroy had been reduced to rubble. But no one knew if the sacrifice of the city of Talas and the destruction of the myriad Rakshasa earthen stronghold formation had truly killed the Arab war god Qutayba. A few moments later, intense coughing came from the depths of the dust, causing Wang Chong's group to grimace. Unforgivable. Truly unforgivable. A gloomy and extremely angry voice rang in everyone's ears at the same time. Huh! A fierce gale blew past, and the massive pillar of dust that had connected the heavens and earth suddenly began to dissipate. And in the depths of the dust, Tensum Zhang above the ground, a familiar figure, dignified and disdainful, once more leapt into view. Although they couldn't see the man's face clearly, judging from his figure, everyone could only think of one person. The Arab war god Qutayba. Impossible. Wang Chong, the evil emperor, chief of Wuxiang, and Gao Xianji all widened their eyes in shock. This was especially the case for Anqi Protector General Gao Xianji. His fingers clenched so tightly that they cracked, a look of extreme shock on his face. Although the plan had been proposed by Wang Chong, Gao Xianji, as the supervisor and verifier, had participated in the entire process. Because of the repeated verification of Wang Chong's plan, Gao Xianji knew the process and details of the entire plan like the back of his hand. The energy of the 100,000 Rakshasa earthen stronghold formation was simply too great. It had already surpassed the level of any warrior. Even Wang Chong had to use the power of the 9 Dragon Blood War banner, and the formation formed by everyone to guide this energy out of his hands, instead of simply converting it to his own use. No one could withstand such a tremendous and terrifying power. Every moment it stayed in one's body was an additional moment of danger of explosion. According to Gao Xianji's experience and knowledge, there was no martial artist who could resist such a powerful force. It was beyond the scope of human beings. But Gao Xianji had never imagined that not only had Qutayba managed to resist, he had even survived. Boom! Just as this thought flashed through Gao Xianji's mind, in an instant, a strange change occurred. A violent force swept out from the billowing smoke and dust like a storm. That imposing and majestic figure burst out, sweeping through the entire void. Boom! A moment later, all the dust was blown away, revealing a terrifying figure that exploded with golden light as it charged toward Wang Chong, the demonic emperor old man, and the black-armored guard. This golden figure had been extremely far away at the start, but a moment later, it was right in front of Wang Chong's group. Not good. Wang Chong paled in fright, and with no time to think he punched, the vast stellar energy around his body transforming into a steely fist that punched at Qutayba. At this moment, the Arab war god Qutayba's hair was disheveled, his entire body covered in blood, and his aura was in disarray. However, the energy around his body had only increased, reaching a terrifying level that was even more frightening than before. Wang Chong could sense that although Qutayba seemed to be in a sorry state, the energy within his body was incredibly powerful and pure. It was like a blazing sun was burning within his body, and this energy had far surpassed the level of ordinary stellar energy. The subtle realm. Wang Chong's body trembled as he sensed this energy, a look of disbelief on his face. He was no stranger to this sun-like energy, but he had never imagined that Qutayba's talent and strength would be so terrifying. In the middle of an intense battle, he had managed to break through and reach the subtle realm. Before breaking through, Qutayba would have been doomed by the attacks of the myriad Rakshasa earthen stronghold formation, but after breaking through, though he had still been heavily injured, he had managed to survive. In the midst of this crisis, he had even managed to save Abu Muslim, Ibak, and Huashu Wuzong. Even though the 4 of them had also been heavily injured, they had at least managed to survive. Buzz! Qutayba's hair was blowing in the wind, and his eyes were blood red. In this battle, Wang Chong had used retreat to advance, successfully luring Kateba into his encirclement and heavily injuring him. But he had also succeeded in provoking Kateba's extreme rage. No one could play around with Kateba like this. In Arabia, Kateba was invincible and invincible, a war god worshipped by all. But in this eastern Talas, from his bleeding hands to his ability to stand on equal footing with the evil emperor, and then to his heavy injuries from Wang Chong's myriad Rakshasa earthen stronghold formation, all of this had shattered Kateba's golden body of invincibility that he had forged over the last few decades. And the proud and conceited Kateba had seen his dignity trampled again and again, all the way into the mud. This filled him with rage. Bang! Kateba punched again. This time, it was no longer a blazing sword chi, but a ball of energy that shone like the sun. This dazzling light was even more dazzling than the sun, and seemed capable of incinerating all things in the world. Careful! With a loud bellow, the evil emperor, Chief Wuxiang, Gao Xinji, and the black-armored guard all charged at Kateba. Destructive torrents of energy surged toward Kateba, and Wang Chong's body exploded with a heaven-shaking light as he joined the others in attacking Kateba. Warning! Superside mission. Kill the Arab war god Kateba. Black flames are the flowing lava of hell. This is the strongest man to walk out of the Azura battlefield. His talent is unparalleled, and he represents the soul of the Arab army. Starting from now, user will be rewarded 40,000 points of destiny energy for killing the Arab war god Kateba within 20 minutes. The less time user takes, the greater the reward. If user takes more than 20 minutes, user will die. At this moment, a stream of information poured into Wang Chong's mind. Wang Chong had never imagined that the Stone of Destiny would issue a mission to kill Kateba at a time like this, and it would even reward him with 40,000 points of destiny energy, with no upper limit. This was definitely the mission with the greatest reward that Wang Chong had ever received. But Wang Chong had no time to worry about it at this moment. His hair was flying in the wind, his scalp was going numb, and his body felt like it was being electrocuted. An enormous sense of danger was surging over him like a tide. Although the Arab war god Kateba had been heavily injured by Wang Chong's myriad Rakshasa earthen stronghold formation, he had successfully broken into the subtle realm, and the danger level had only increased. Rumble! The Stone of Destiny's voice had barely faded away when the attacks of Wang Chong, the evil emperor, the chief of Wuxiang, the black-armored guard, and Gao Xinji collided with the spatial energy in Kateba's hand. Aya! The five of them felt like they had been heavily injured, their chests trembling as they were sent flying. Bang bang bang! They crashed into the ground in 5 different directions. The aftershocks of Kateba's attack even pulverized the soldiers of the Divine Martial Army and Divine Prison Army. Aya! Screams filled the air as countless people were pulverized, and even their armor was melted into molten metal. Retreat! Hurry and retreat! Behind the first defense line, Li Sai, Kong Xian, Xue Qianjun, Zhang Ke, and Su Hanshan all paled in fright and began to retreat in panic, throwing the army into chaos. The horses neighed, and everyone was frightened by this scene. The city of Talas had collapsed, and so had the myriad Rakshasa earthen stronghold formation. But even after enduring such a dreadful attack, Kateba's strength had only increased. With a single punch, he had heavily injured Wang Chong, the evil emperor, the chief of Wuxiang, and Gao Xinji. Today, I will kill all of you. Kateba's eyes were cold, and his terrifying killing intent caused the air around him to twist. Clang! He extended a hand, and in a flash of golden light, the massive sword that had accompanied him for half his life, God's might, flew into Kateba's hand. With this divine sword in hand, Kateba's killing intent soared even higher, frightening even gods and ghosts alike. Run! Scatter and run! Everyone was stunned, their faces pale as they stared at Kateba. Even unarmed, Kateba was already so terrifying. If he wielded a sword and used the sword technique he was most skilled in, this place would be littered with whales and rivers of blood, and everyone would die. Nay! The air currents surged. Countless warhorses neighed, leaped and fled in fear. They couldn't even pull on the reins. Dust and stone flew through the air as Kataba's massive sword, God's might, flashed with golden light and unleashed a destructive blow. A moment later, plush. Without any warning, Kataba's chest trembled, and he vomited a mouthful of blood. Kataba's aura immediately weakened. He's injured. That bastard's injured. He wasn't as strong as he appeared. The myriad Rakshasa earthen stronghold formation succeeded in heavily injuring him. Everyone was invigorated by this sight, and the eyes of Wang Chong, the chief of Wuxiang, and the evil emperor instantly brightened. Chapter 1162. But Kataba was a man, not a god. Given his personality, he would never vomit blood unless his injuries were extremely severe. It was clear that Kataba had been using his energy to suppress his injuries this entire time. He was far from being as powerful and invincible as he appeared. Go! Wang Chong's eyes flashed with cold light as he immediately leaped forward. He was wearing his newly purchased Heavenly Mandate battle armor, which could weaken attacks by 40%. Even though Kataba had broken into the subtle realm and possessed far more energy than anyone else, the damage he could inflict on Wang Chong was far less terrifying. In terms of pure defensive ability, no one, including the evil emperor, Gao Xianji, and the chief of Wuxiang, could compare to Wang Chong. In a head-on battle, only Wang Chong could stand up to Kataba. Great destruction art. Wang Chong immediately used the strongest technique of the great Yin-Yang heaven creation art. The world darkened as a river of pure destructive energy rumbled toward Kataba. Chonger, watch out. At almost the same time, a hint of extreme worry flashed through the evil emperor's eyes. But there was no time to think. Bang! The evil emperor's body shot forward. A starving camel was still larger than a horse, and a centipede could die but not be paralyzed. Kataba had already been extremely terrifying before his breakthrough, and now that he had broken into the subtle realm, his body was filled with that scorching high-class spatial energy of extreme yang. It was extremely dangerous for Wang Chong to charge forward alone. Venerable Senior, generally, let's go as well. Gao Xianji's shout rang out in everyone's ears. Bang bang bang. In a series of explosions, Gao Xianji, the chief of Wuxiang, and the black armored guard all lunged at Kataba. Gao Xianji, the chief of Wuxiang, the evil emperor, and the black armored guard were the only ones who seemed to be wearing extremely special armor that could block many attacks. The others were in dire straits. It was just that at this critical moment of life and death, it was either you die or I die, so there was no time to care about anything else. Ignorant. Do you think that you can defeat me like this? Since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. Kataba's face was cold and aloof, and an even higher level of energy surged out of his body. That dazzling golden light that could melt metal surged into Kataba's giant sword. Bang! Kataba's sword slashed down, bathing the world in dazzling golden light. Boom! A storm of energy swept through the world, forcing back Wang Chong, the evil emperor, the chief of Wuxiang, and the black armored guard. Chonger, don't give him time. He's only just broken into the subtle realm, and hasn't truly comprehended the power of the subtle realm. Everything he's doing is still at his original level. Once he truly comprehends the power of the subtle realm, all of us will be dead. The evil emperor's beard trembled, his expression urgent. Given the state of his body, the fact that he had been able to fight for so long was already far above normal. Bang! The evil emperor stomped down, kicking up a plume of dust as he charged toward Kataba. No one understood more than him just how terrifying the subtle realm was. Once Kataba completely grasped this power, even though he was heavily injured, the five of them were no match for him. Master, watch out. With no time to think, Wang Chong took the initiative to attack Kataba. Behind him, the chief of Wuxiang thrust his staff forward, and the black armored guard and Gao Xianji also raised their banners and swords, using all their strength to attack Kataba. Careful! Don't let Kataba face them alone. Boom! The earth quaked as Ibak slammed his palm against the ground and shot into the air toward Wang Chong and the evil emperor. As the winds howled through the air, Ibak's eyes widened as he subconsciously glanced at the tip of Kataba's finger, where dark red blood was seeping out. Kataba was intentionally concealing his actions so that Wang Chong and the others could not see. But Ibak was right behind Qutayba, so he could see everything clearly. Although he occasionally had some minor conflicts with Qutayba, and was somewhat unwilling to accept that they were both governors, there was no question at this moment that Qutayba had become the soul of the Arab army. Without him, even if the Arab army had twice the size of the Tang dynasties, they would still be doomed. Qutayba's status was irreplaceable. Not Ibak, Abu Muslim, Ziyad, or the Uzun great general Huaishu Wuzong could compare to him. Go! Behind Ibak, a black ball of energy as tough as steel exploded, and then Abu Muslim took a step forward and shot forward. As the strongest governor of iron and blood in the Arab East, Abu Muslim had a thunderous reputation to the west of the Tsong Mountains. But whether it was Abu Muslim, Qutayba, or Ibak, in this war with the Great Tang, the pride and self-esteem of these supreme Arab experts had long ago been shattered into pieces and no longer existed. Abu Muslim could only hope that after paying such a heavy price, he could completely defeat the Tang dynasty. Asmodai's fury, the enormous three-headed demon god, appeared behind Abu Muslim and let out a shrill roar, its body brimming with destructive energy. As Abu Muslim swung his steely fist at Wang Chong's group, Wang Chong's eyes widened. It was the same move, Asmodeus Wrath, but it was completely different from the previous one. Not only the momentum of the attack, but the strength and speed of the attack. Even the huge three-headed demonic god behind Asmodeus had faded to the extreme. It was no longer as shocked as before. Wang Chong had used the energy of the myriad Rakshasa earthen stronghold to deal far more damage to Qutayba and Abu Muslim's group than it seemed. Although Qutayba had relied on himself to break into the subtle realm and protect Abu Muslim and Ibak's group, allowing them to survive the explosion, even Qutayba had been heavily injured. One could easily imagine the situation of Abu Muslim and Ibak's group. All of Abu Muslim's organs and meridians had been severely damaged. He was no longer as strong as before. Bang bang! The earth boomed twice, and then golden Buddhist energy surged as Huaishu Wuzong once more assumed the form of the Vairocana Buddha. At the same time, Ziyad threw out the ocean ring. But both Huaishu Huizong and Ziyad's attacks were incomparably dim, completely incomparable to the grandeur of their previous attacks. An arrow at the end of its flight, yet you still dare to come over. Wang Chong's ears were sharp and his eyes were sharp. Although he was fighting with Qutayba, he was also keeping an eye on Ibak, Abu Muslim, and Huaishu Wuzong. In the past, Wang Chong would have found it extremely difficult to deal with these four great generals working together. But now, all four of them were heavily injured, and their injuries were even more severe than those of the chief of Wuxiang and the evil emperor. To come over at a time like this was simply seeking death. Great Yin-Yang Heaven creation art. Wang Chong thrust out a palm, his right hand transforming into a steely fist that fused with the golden god behind him. As he continued to fight with Qutayba, his left hand aimed at the distant Abu Muslim and Ibak's group. The terrifying devouring ability of the great Yin-Yang Heaven creation art immediately exploded forward. Not good. Abu Muslim's group had only just begun to attack when they sensed that something was wrong. Abu Muslim's Asmodai's fury, Ibak's Pharaoh's power, Huaishu Huizong's Buddhist energy from the Vairocana golden body, and even Ziyad's ocean ring had all been drawn in. Even the stellar energy in their bodies went out of control. It surged out of their pores and transformed into a bloody mist that surged into Wang Chong's body. This bastard is using an evil art again. Ibak was both shocked and infuriated. He had been charging at Wang Chong when he suddenly stopped and shot back in the direction he had come. He had come quickly and left even faster. At almost the same time, Abu Muslim, Ibak, Huaishu Wuzong, and Ziyad began to retreat in panic. Ziyad's situation was even more dire than everyone else's. His ocean ring had been aimed at Wang Chong, but in a flash, before it could even strike Wang Chong's head, he had hurriedly pulled it back. He had only been able to reach the great general level because of the ocean ring in his hand. More than half of his attacks had been focused on this ritual tool. If Wang Chong were to take this ocean ring, Ziyad would immediately drop to the brigadier general level, perhaps even lower than Cheng Qianli. Reckless. As Wang Chong was forcing back the four great generals, Kataba's cold and emotionless voice resounded in everyone's ears. Boom! While Wang Chong was using the great Yin-Yang Heaven creation art to devour the blood energy and energy of Abu Muslim's group, Kataba thrust out a palm covered in dazzling golden armor. A palm covered in dazzling golden armor shot forward like a bolt of lightning between Wang Chong and Abu Muslim's group, forcefully blocking Wang Chong's great Yin-Yang Heaven creation art. Rumble! There was a massive boom as a golden light several dozen times brighter than the sun exploded out of Kataba's palm like a hurricane. Rumble! The earth rumbled and the air trembled. In the face of Kataba's terrifying subtle energy, Wang Chong made no attempt to dodge, instead extending a palm to grab at Kataba. The great Yin-Yang Heaven creation art that had been aimed at Abu Muslim's group immediately changed targets and shot toward Kataba. Bang! A moment later, Wang Chong was left dumbfounded. Chapter 1163. Chonger, watch out. You still haven't reached the subtle realm, so you can't absorb the energy of the subtle realm. The evil emperor looked in Wang Chong's direction, his eyes filled with worry. The evil emperor's warning was very timely, but it was still too slow for Kataba. Boom! A moment later, a destructive golden storm exploded toward Wang Chong, the evil emperor, and the charging chief of Wuxia, and the black-armored guard. Bang bang bang! The enormous energy sent the evil emperor crashing into the steel walls 10 some zhang behind him. There was a massive boom and a cloud of dust. The evil emperor and the steel walls weighed more than 10,000 jin, were smashed to the ground by Kataba's absolute strength. At the same time, the Wuxiang village chief grunted as he crashed into the ground, leaving a massive hole in the ground. Countless gravel shot out in all directions like arrows. As for the black-armored guard and Go Xianji, they both staggered and fell to the ground. The huge impact forced them back several steps. Their chests trembled, and they vomited a mouthful of blood. Kataba's strength had already reached an unimaginable level. They had already been injured, and now they were even more injured. Rumble! The last to be sent flying was not the black-armored guard or Gao Xianji, but Wang Chong. There was a massive boom as Wang Chong smashed into the ground like a human-shaped meteor, leaving a trail of dust in his wake. His body was like a plow, gouging out a ditch more than 2 meters deep. At a glance, he looked like the abdomen of a massive arthropod. Whoosh! When the dust settled, Wang Chong, still half kneeling on the ground, suddenly raised his head and his body. His chest trembled. Although he tried his best to suppress it, he couldn't. He suddenly felt a sweetness in his throat, and a mouthful of blood suddenly sprayed out. The light in Wang Chong's eyes dimmed a lot. His face was as pale as a sheet of paper. Intense pain came from every part of his body, as if he was being bitten by thousands of ants. The Heavenly Mandate battle armor could reduce damage by 40%. Its defensive power was already frightening, but even so, the remaining 60% still dealt massive damage to Wang Chong. This was the first time Wang Chong had fought against the minute subtlety level of power. This kind of power had already surpassed the Saint Martial realm. Even though Wang Chong had absorbed a large amount of energy from the myriad Rakshasa earthen stronghold formation, he still couldn't fight against this kind of power. Too strong. It couldn't stop him at all. Although the energy in his body isn't too strong, its nature is very sharp, as if it wants to destroy everything. Wang Chong knelt on one knee and murmured, his heart palpitating. At this moment, he suddenly understood why the Stone of Destiny had issued such a high reward for this super-side mission. Even though Kataba was heavily injured, he was still a terrifying supreme expert, and from a certain perspective, he was even more terrifying than before. Clatter! Countless thoughts flitted through his mind. At this moment, Wang Chong suddenly heard the faint sound of water dripping. It was so soft that it was almost inaudible on the chaotic battlefield. But to Wang Chong, who had just reached the great general level, and had broken through all the bottlenecks to become a top-class great general, this sound was as clear as a bell. But to Wang Chong, what was most important was not the sound of the water itself, but the direction it was coming from. Kataba, in the end you were still injured. I'd like to see just how long you can last. Wang Chong raised his head and looked in Kataba's direction. He could immediately see the blood dripping down the palm that Kataba had hidden behind his back. For an expert like Kateba, especially one who had broken into the subtle realm that not even his master, the evil emperor, had been able to reach, to evaporate the blood in his palm was far too easy. But now, despite the invincible power he had displayed, blood was still dripping down his finger. This could only mean one thing. Kateba's internal injuries were far more severe than they seemed. He couldn't even evaporate the blood to hide the marks. Not only that, even though Kateba had put on an extremely valiant display of strength, that only those who submitted to him would prosper, and those who opposed him would perish, he had uncharacteristically not pursued Wang Chong's group even after sending them flying. Wang Chong instantly understood. This scoundrel is just bluffing. He's intentionally stalling for time to heal his injuries. In a flash, Wang Chong's mind flashed, and he suddenly understood. Everyone had seen just how powerful Kateba was. If he was allowed to buy time and slowly heal his injuries, all of them would be doomed. The less time used, the greater the reward. If user takes more than 20 minutes, user will die. The Stone of Destiny's warning resounded in Wang Chong's mind, and he suddenly understood why the Stone of Destiny had not said mission failure. User will be obliterated, but user will die. There was no need for the Stone of Destiny to obliterate them. As long as Kateba suppressed his injuries, he could use his perfect subtle realm cultivation to kill all of them. The entire army of the Tang dynasty in the city of Talas would probably be completely wiped out and buried here. Kateba, die for me! Wang Chong's body shot forward like a cannonball, charging at Kateba with astonishing speed. In the sky, Kateba, who had always remained unfazed even in the face of Mount Tai collapsing, instantly paled. Wang Chong had not spoken in the language of the Tang dynasty, but in the language of Arabia that he was extremely familiar with. Wang Chong's guess was correct. Kateba had been bluffing this entire time, concealing his injuries so that he could buy time to heal. But the myriad Rakshasa earthen stronghold formation was simply too powerful. Even though Kateba had done his best to hide it, Wang Chong had still seen through it. Seeking your own death. No matter how heavily injured I am, killing you is still as easy as turning over my hand. Kateba grimaced, a thick killing intent erupting from his body. The rage and killing intent on Kateba's face was so thick that it was suffocating. All that composure from before was gone. As one of the illustrious Arab war gods, Kateba had killed far too many so-called experts. But Wang Chong, a nameless infidel from the east, and the myriad Rakshasa earthen stronghold formation, had left Kateba with no dignity left, leaving him with a defeat that he had never suffered before in his life. To Kateba, being heavily injured by a group of Eastern infidels was no different from being defeated. Kateba had previously done his utmost to hide his injuries, but now that he had been exposed in Arabic, he no longer needed to conceal them. Clang! With a heaven-shaking sword cry, Kateba's god's might flew into his hand and slashed at Wang Chong. Boom! The world seemed to be torn in two as Kateba's trademark golden sword chi once more slashed at Wang Chong. Without suppressing his injuries, Kateba was even more terrifying, vicious and fierce than before. Bzzz. This sword seemed to come from the distant horizon, but in the blink of an eye, it was only a few inches from Wang Chong's head. Boom! But as this sword slashed down, a massive fissure appeared in the earth 1,000 feet in front of Kateba. After cleaving through the rock, the sword chi cleaved a distant steel wall in two. The ferocious sword chi disappeared into the distance, leaving behind a huge sword mark on the ground. Bastard! Kateba's eyes couldn't help but twitch at this sight. Unlike before, Wang Chong had not taken this attack head-on. Instead, at the last moment, he had managed to dodge Kateba's astonishing attack by a hair. Kateba, I'd like to see how long you can last. Su Han's Han, Zhang Ke, all of you, get out of the way. As Wang Chong's voice resounded through the heavens, the stellar energy in his body began to churn. A new energy began to gather in his body, and in the blink of an eye, a new golden halo of speed shot out of Wang Chong's dantian and landed at his feet. At the same time, the three halos of Dusk Stallion also exploded forward, bolstering Wang Chong's feet. Ever since he had broken through the bottleneck and reached the Great General level, he had advanced all the way to the peak of Great General. To Wang Chong, many of the martial arts he had learned in the past were no longer as difficult to cultivate. He only needed a few moments to refine them, and with these two halos bolstering him, Wang Chong's speed immediately swelled. Kateba, come. Let's see who will be the final victor. Wang Chong was ready to throw caution to the wind. Based on the Stone of Destiny's voice, Kateba would only need 20 minutes at most to suppress his injuries, or perhaps to nurse them back to health. At that time, all of them would be dead. No matter what, Wang Chong could only defend by attacking, not giving him any time to catch his breath. In this battle, Wang Chong could not dodge, so he could only take the initiative to attack. Between the two of them, only one of them would die. Boom! Wang Chong stomped down, instantly transforming into a puff of smoke that vanished from the spot. In front of Kateba, a Wuxia steel sword that could cleave through metal emerged from the void like a venomous snake and stabbed at Kateba's throat. Kateba's eyes chilled, and his massive sword, God's might, moved even faster than Wang Chong. Completely ignoring Wang Chong's Wuxia steel sword, he cleaved Wang Chong in two with a single slash. But Kateba was not the slightest bit happy that his sword had succeeded. On the contrary, he paled. Chapter 1164. Illusion. Kateba instantly realized what was happening, and his face twisted into a nasty grimace. At his current level of cultivation, ordinary illusions were child's play that couldn't even enter his eyes, much less confuse him. But Wang Chong's illusion had reached a level where it could even fool his senses. This was clearly no ordinary illusion. Boom! There was no time to think. A dazzling golden light suffused with destructive energy shot out of Kateba's back, transforming into a large piece of armor that seemed to be made of iron and steel. Boom! Wang Chong's Wuxia steel sword, which could cut through tempered steel like mud, was unable to advance a single inch against this subtle realm armor. Boom boom boom! Not only had Wang Chong failed to injure Kateba, he had been forced back several dozen steps by the shockwaves of the explosion. Chong, are careful. His grasp of the subtle realm energy is getting more and more refined. If you give him more time, you won't be able to contend against him. Think about the origin of energy that your master told you about. He has only just comprehended the energy of the subtle realm, and still can't enter the world of energy. We need to find a way to cut off his source of energy. The demonic emperor old man's voice came from the distance. His eyes were cold and his expression grave. Although his severe injuries made it impossible for him to participate in the battle between Wang Chong and Kateba, the evil emperor had been watching the battle from a distance, his eyes fixed on the pair and observing every detail. His extraordinary insight, knowledge, and rich combat experience allowed him to quickly understand the crux of dealing with Kateba. Buzz! A flash of inspiration flitted through Wang Chong's mind. The evil emperor's words instantly sent a ripple through Wang Chong's mind. His master had been correct. Kateba had a massive weakness. At the very least, he still couldn't enter the world of energy. The world of the origin of Qi was not something that everyone possessed. It was a skill unique to his master. By relying on the most legendary and unique cultivation method in the entire Central Plains, the myriad spirit sea art, his master had comprehended the essence of energy and taught it to Chief of Wuxiang and Wang Chong, allowing them to enter the world of the essence of energy. But Kateba was different. He had never cultivated the myriad spirit sea art, so he naturally could not enter the world of energy. In the next moment, countless sparks appeared in Wang Chong's mind. In the blink of an eye, Wang Chong sent a portion of his consciousness into the world of energy. In front of him was a grotesque world of endless energy. However, it was different from the world he had seen before. At this moment, in the world of energy that Wang Chong saw, all the energy was in a frenzy. This battle had completely altered the distribution of origin energy around Talas. With a cursory glance, Wang Chong immediately saw countless energy vortexes on the battlefield. These energy vortexes were of different sizes, colors, and strengths. These were the generals of the various factions. Wang Chong immediately understood what was going on. Everyone was exhausted, and they did not have the strength to participate in the battle between him and Kateba. Thus, They were using this time to absorb origin energy and recover their strength so that they could launch a fierce attack once the battle was over. This should be Kateba. Wang Chong's gaze quickly moved away from these generals to the largest vortex of energy in front of him. This energy whirlpool was unimaginably large. Its size and ferocity were enough to make other generals pale in comparison and lose their splendor. And if one looked carefully, one would see that this vortex was like a violent black hole, devouring the surrounding energy in an extremely chaotic manner. There was no rhyme or reason to the flow of energy, and some of the energy would even collide and destroy each other. Even an ordinary martial artist would know that this vortex of energy was extremely unstable and could be destroyed at any moment. His injuries were far more severe than imagined. Wang Chong's mind was clear. Kateba might have been able to fool them, but he could not hide his energy. And from how chaotic this energy was, Kateba's condition was 10,000 times worse than what he had revealed to everyone. But even so, Kateba had not reached the point of collapse. In the center of the vortex, Wang Chong could see a golden red energy, as tough as steel wire, pouring down from the highest point of the world of energy into the center of the vortex. Although the energy was not very thick, only the thickness of half a chopstick, his energy was constantly increasing. Wang Chong followed this golden red energy upward, immediately seeing the deepest part of the world of energy. Several balls of light larger than the sun and several dozen times more blazing than the sun hung high in the sky. Kateba's energy originated from these balls of light. Subtle realm energy. In a flash, Wang Chong's mind was filled with inspiration, and he understood everything like the back of his hand. The source of Kateba's energy was the high-level spatial energy above his head. Although it didn't seem very far at first, as if he could reach it with just a bit of effort, Wang Chong was well aware that the difference between the peak of the Saint Martial realm and the subtle realm was not a matter of distance but space-time. If one did not comprehend the mysteries of the subtle realm, no matter how hard one tried, one would never be able to absorb the energy of the subtle realm. Even more troublesome was that the high-level energy that Kateba was absorbing from the depths of the world of energy was only as thick as a chopstick, but it was constantly growing thicker and thicker. Moreover, this high-level space-time energy was suppressing and stabilizing the chaotic tides of energy. In other words, as long as Kateba could continue to absorb the powerful energy of the subtle realm, his injuries and chaotic energy would not easily explode or collapse. Master is right. If I want to defeat Kateba, I have to cut off his energy source. Otherwise, if this continues, no one will be a match for him. Not even the heavenly mandate battle armor will be able to stop him. Wang Chong began to worry. Whether in terms of talent, strength, or ability, Kateba was someone that Wang Chong had never seen before. In the countries outside the Central Plains, Kateba was undoubtedly a true hero amongst men. This placed an enormous pressure on Wang Chong. But even so, Wang Chong remained calm. Anxiety and panic were of no use. As the commander of the army, Wang Chong was well aware that only calm, meticulous thinking would allow him to find a way out of this predicament. As these thoughts flitted through his mind, Wang Chong quickly regained his composure. The crux of the subtle realm lies in one's cultivation level, and cultivation level lies in one's comprehension. In order to comprehend higher levels of cultivation, one must possess extraordinary psychic energy. This also means that the reason Kateba is able to continuously absorb this energy is not because of the energy itself, but because of his psychic energy. Wang Chong's mind was in turmoil, tens of thousands of thoughts flying through his mind like lightning bolts. Time was short, and the lives of tens of thousands of soldiers, even the final outcome of this war, were all in his hands. All of this placed a mountainous pressure on Wang Chong. At this moment, not even Wang Chong realized that his mind was spinning at an astonishing speed. If someone could cut open Wang Chong's mind and see the speed at which his thoughts were moving, they would definitely be stunned. So if I want to defeat Kateba, the crux isn't in strength or stellar energy. It doesn't even have much to do with energy. Wang Chong's eyes grew brighter and brighter, more and more spirited. I know what to do. With this final thought, Wang Chong's eyes slowly hardened. In terms of cultivation level, Wang Chong had to admit that even though he had become a great general, he was still no match for the Arab war god Qutayba. But in terms of psychic energy, Wang Chong was confident that there were few people in the world who could surpass him in psychic energy. Not even Qutayba, even if he had broken into the subtle realm, could compare to him. With this final thought, Wang Chong opened his eyes and looked forward. There, Qutayba's hand was exploding with a new wave of golden subtle energy. That dazzling golden sword that seemed to come from the celestial realm was raised high into the air, ready to unleash a thunderous blow. Although Wang Chong felt like he had been in the world of energy for a very long time, in reality, only a moment had passed in the real world. Boom! Just as Qutayba was about to strike, an enormous wave of psychic energy surged through the air and slammed into Qutayba's mind. Boom! Boom! It was like a meteor had struck the earth. Qutayba's body shuddered, and a look of extreme shock appeared on his face. God's might trembled in his hand, and the majestic sword that had been slashing at the demonic emperor old man clearly paused for a moment. In the invisible world of energy, Wang Chong could clearly see that the scarlet string of energy connecting Qutayba to the high-level spatial energy in the sky seemed to be plucked by an invisible string and began to fiercely vibrate. Like dominoes falling, the energy vortex representing Qutayba seemed to lose control and fell into disarray. Bastard! Qutayba paled, his eyes turning to stare at Wang Chong. He had been standing there like a towering mountain, but in the next instant, he took a step forward and appeared right in front of Wang Chong. The massive sword in his hand, God's might, was as swift as a bolt of lightning as he slashed down on Wang Chong. Chapter 1165. It's useless, Qutayba. I already know your weakness. You won't have a chance to recover your strength and reverse the situation. The three Wang Chongs said the same thing as they retreated in three different directions, putting some distance between them and Qutayba. Boom! As Wang Chong retreated, he felt a gust of wind, and at the same time, a ruthless voice rang out in his ears. Brat, I don't believe that I can't force out your true body. While Wang Chong and Qutayba were fighting, Ibak had been retreating to the distance, but at this moment, Ibak had snuck up behind Wang Chong and lunged at one of the Wang Chongs. Roar! Roar! The pharaoh's shrill roar resounded through the sky as Ibak lunged at one of the Wang Chongs. The pharaoh's power surged out of his hand and slammed into the second Wang Chong. Wang Chong's clones were far too powerful, and not even Qutayba had been able to recognize them. But Ibak was confident that even the most formidable of clones or illusions would have their flaws, and could not compare to the true body of a martial artist. Qutayba would deal with one Wang Chong, while Ibak would attack from behind, using his stellar energy to attack one Wang Chong, while he dealt with the other Wang Chong. In this way, no matter which one of the Wang Chongs was, he would be able to quickly identify it. Ibak, you're truly seeking death. Before Ibak could succeed, an icy voice resounded in Ibak's ears. The Wang Chong in front of him vanished like a bubble, and behind him, a hand moved like a bolt of lightning, pressing down on his shoulder, 5 fingers stabbing deep into his flesh like pincers. Great Inyang Heaven creation art. A voice resounded through the world, and Ibak felt like he had been plunged into an icehouse, his face ghastly pale. At this moment, Ibak suddenly understood that he had fallen into a trap. He had truly been stealthily approaching Wang Chong to plot against him, but Wang Chong had also been plotting against Ibak. Although his attention had been focused on Qutayba, Ibak had not been able to escape his notice. Die! With a sharp gaze, Wang Chong's fingers erupted with a terrifying suction force that caused the world to pale. Ibak's energy immediately surged into Wang Chong's body. Ibak was not the strongest Arab commander, but he had caused far more trouble for Wang Chong and the other Tang dynasty armies than any other Arab commander. This was also why Wang Chong wanted to kill him. Qutayba, save me. As the stellar energy in his body rapidly flowed out, Ibak's eyes went wide and his face paled, fear appearing in his eyes. As the highest commander of the Mamelukes, Ibak had spent half his life on conquest, killing countless foes, suppressing many uprisings and breaching many cities. But this was the first time he had sensed the scent of death. Asmodee's fury. Wrath of the sea. Wang Chong, release him. Vairocana Buddha saber. Seeing that Ibak was being restrained and in danger of dying at any moment, Abu Muslim, Huashu Wazong, and Ziad were enraged. The three of them attacked Wang Chong from 3 different directions. Bang bang bang. The 3 of them stomped on the ground and soared into the air, their surging stellar energy hurtling toward Wang Chong with astonishing speed. Hurry and attack. The evil emperor, chief of Wuxiang, and the others tensed up at the sight of Wang Chong being surrounded and shot into the air. The evil emperor, chief of Wuxiang, Abu Muslim, and Ziad had maintained a weak balance. As long as they did not move, the evil emperor and chief of Wuxiang would not move. Both sides were heavily injured and had no other choice. But now that Abu Muslim's group had broken the balance, the evil emperor's group was forced to move. In Wang Chong's condition, he could not possibly deal with Qutayba and so many Arab great generals at the same time. Boom boom boom. The origin energy in the world fiercely rippled as energy gathered from all around. Under the control of the demonic emperor Old Man and Wuxiang village chief, it transformed into massive hands that attacked Abu Muslim, Ziad and Qutayba. A mantis trying to stop a chariot. Qutayba thrust out one of his hands, unleashing a storm of subtle energy that could melt metal and steel. With a single blow, he shattered the attacks of the evil emperor and chief of Wuxiang. His surging energy hit the 2 of them and instantly sent them flying. The 2 of them twisted in the air, and though they had done all they could to neutralize this energy, they still couldn't stop their faces from paling and their bodies from trembling as they vomited blood. Master! Wang Chong grimaced, his eyes surging with blood. His master and the chief of Wuxiang were in extremely poor condition. Their bodies were already on the verge of exhaustion, and they had already done all they could to last this long. Qutayba, if you want to save Ibak, then I'll give it to you. Wang Chong's eyes were crimson, and in a flash, he vanished from where he stood. At almost the same time, a golden beam of sword chi descended from the sky, narrowly missing Wang Chong's original position. At the same time, the attacks of Abu Muslim, Ziad, Huashu Huaitsong, and the others arrived. In a heaven-shaking explosion, all 4 attacks struck nothing but air. Wang Chong seemed to have predicted this, perfectly dodging all their attacks. Several dozen zhang away, Wang Chong's figure appeared in a flash of light, his hair flying in the wind, and the stellar energy in his body rumbling with a sound like that of an avalanche. As for the leader of the Mamelukes, Wang Chong lifted Ibak over his head. His skin and muscles rapidly withered, and in just a few moments, Ibak had lost 3/4 of his energy. Even more terrifying was that after being struck by Wang Chong's great Yin-Yang heaven creation art, Ibak had lost control of his energy and blood. He was like a fish on the chopping block, waiting to be slaughtered. Aya! Aya! With a scream, Ibak's last sliver of energy was drained away by Wang Chong, and he was dead. Since you want to save him, then take it. Wang Chong's blood energy roiled, his energy surging to the extreme. After absorbing Ibak's energy, Wang Chong's strength swelled, the stellar energy in his body surging like a great river. Boom! Wang Chong threw Ibak to the ground in front of Abu Muslim's group. His armor clanked, and a grizzled head flew out rolling far away. Bastard! The eyes of Abu Muslim, Ziad, and the others went red, especially Abu Muslim, whose entire body exploded with terrifying killing intent. He had fought side by side with Ibak several times, and Ibak had come at his invitation. Abu Muslim had never imagined that Ibak would die here. Seeking death, Abu Muslim seemed to have gone mad as he lunged at Wang Chong, the bronze gauntlet in his hands glowing brightly as he punched. Black stellar energy flew through the air, twisting and contorting as he howled like a demon god. But before Abu Muslim could get very far, a golden sword chi flew through the air, brushing past him and cleaving the space around Wang Chong in 2. Only Qutayba could unleash such a fast attack. But this swift attack still missed. 2 golden halos had appeared beneath Wang Chong's feet, pushing his speed to the limit. Even Qutayba would find it difficult to strike. Boom! The moment Qutayba attacked, Wang Chong's counterattack came, a steely psychic energy slamming into Qutayba's mind. Qutayba's body instantly froze, as Wang Chong forced him out of the air. In the past, when Kateba's psychic energy was at its peak, Wang Chong would have found it very difficult to injure him. But while the current Kateba looked mighty and fierce, his meridians were in disorder, and his organs were heavily injured, no less than the evil emperor's. But Kateba was still young and vigorous, and his body did not have as many problems. Moreover, he had broken into the subtle realm. I'd like to see how long you can last. Kateba's expression was savage. Boom! A golden wave of energy exploded out of his body like a blazing flame. Kateba's speed suddenly increased, and he shot through the air like a sharp sword at Wang Chong. Not even Abu Muslim and the others could keep up with his speed, but a moment later, boom! An invisible energy slammed into Kateba's body, scattering his energy into chaos. Chonga, run! The evil emperor's panicked voice rang out in his ear. The evil emperor had suddenly attacked Kateba, seeking death. Enraged, Kateba immediately turned his head and fired off a bolt of sword chi at the distant demonic emperor old man. But in a flash of light, a figure rushed over and instantly rescued the demonic emperor old man. Master, hold your breath and focus. I'll lend you a hand. Wang Chong's voice rang out in the demonic emperor old man's ear, and before the demonic emperor old man could react, Ibak's vigorous blood energy surged out of Wang Chong's body and into the demonic emperor old man's meridians. Wang Chong had used this method to force the cultivation of an imperial great general into his master's body. Chapter 1166. As one of the titans of his generation and supreme experts of his sect, the evil emperor might not have been able to cultivate the great Yin-Yang heaven creation art, because his dantian had been destroyed, but he knew all the special characteristics of this art, like the back of his hand. The stellar energy that Wang Chong had sent to him quickly filled his body, suppressing his injuries and storing them in his dantian. In just a few moments, the evil emperor's complexion had regained some color. Although it was far from easy to completely recover from his injuries, the evil emperor could at least put up a fight. Chonger, the situation isn't good. Kateba is recovering faster than we imagined. If this continues, it won't be long before you lose the strength to fight against him. The demonic emperor old man's robes flapped in the wind as he looked at Kateba, deep concern in his eyes. Kateba's situation was definitely not good. His golden armor was stained with blood, trickling down the chinks of the armor, but his energy was still steadily growing. The attacks of Wang Chong and the evil emperor had only weakened the subtle realm energy he could draw from the depths of space-time, but they had not been able to completely sever it. Even worse, while the two of them could stop Kateba from absorbing even higher levels of energy, they could not stop him from comprehending the subtle realm. As time passed, Kateba would quickly be able to grasp the energy of the subtle realm, and he might even be able to comprehend some new subtle realm techniques. This was what the evil emperor was worried about. Abu Muslim, Ziad Huashu Wazong, all of you come over here. In the air, Kateba stared at the rapidly growing energy of the evil emperor, a look of extreme apprehension in his eyes. A weakened evil emperor was of little importance to Kateba, but as the evil emperor recovered his strength, Kateba once more felt like a dagger was pressed against his back. This time, Kateba surprisingly did not attack. Kateba, what do you want us to do? Several figures bursting with energy appeared behind Kateba. Abu Muslim, Lin Ziad, and even Huashu Huaitsong had flown over. Give me all your energy. Kateba's expression was cold and aloof as he looked forward, his back to the trio. All three of them were stunned. They had never imagined that Kateba would make such a request. On the fierce battlefield, the Tang people on the opposite side could attack at any time. If their strength dropped too much, they might immediately lose the ability to protect themselves. There's no time. These Tang people are thinking of ways to interfere with my absorption of energy. If this continues, it will be very difficult for me to completely master that new power. Give me your power, I'll kill them all. Kateba's eyes were seething with killing intent. He was tired of this cat-and-mouse game. Whether it was the young commander from the east or the old man in black, he would kill them all in one fell swoop. Abu Muslim said nothing, countless thoughts flitting through his eyes. But he quickly made his decision. Understood, Abu Muslim sternly said. Ziyad, give our energy to him. In the current situation they had no other choice. The Tang dynasty had used the myriad Rakshasa earthen stronghold formation to attack them, completely upsetting the balance. Whether it was Abu Muslim, Ziyad, or Huashu Wuzong, they had all lost the ability to threaten the Tang dynasty. The only one who could truly intimidate them was Qutayba. If he hadn't been standing at the front, blocking the edge of the Tang dynasty, the Arabs and Uzan would have been defeated long ago. Transferring the power to him was the only way at the moment. Bang! Abu Muslim slapped one of his palms against Qutayba's shoulder, sending a torrent of black energy into Qutayba's body. At almost the same time, another arm reached out and slapped Abu Muslim. Ziyad had also made his choice, sending all his energy to Qutayba. Behind them, although Huashu Wuzong didn't understand Arabic, he could tell from their actions that Huashu Wuzong understood everything. Bang! After a moment of hesitation, Huashu Wuzong stepped forward and extended his own arm. At this moment, the three great generals had all chosen to pass their energy to Qutayba. Through this method, the three of them had placed all their hopes of defeating the Tang dynasty in Qutayba's hands. If not even Qutayba could defeat the Tang dynasty, the three of them truly couldn't think of anyone in the world who could. Buzz! As the three poured their energy into him, Qutayba's hair began to stir, and his weak aura began to swell with astonishing speed. In the distance, Wang Chong, the black-armored guard, and Gao Xinji all paled at this sight. Qutayba's move had taken them all by surprise. If he absorbed the energy of the three, the Tang dynasty would be in an extremely disadvantageous position. Chonger, listen. At this moment, the evil emperor's voice resounded in Wang Chong's mind. Pay no attention to Qutayba. As long as it's not the energy of the subtle realm, no matter how much energy he absorbs, it's just drinking poison to quench his thirst. Listen carefully. What I'm about to tell you is extremely important. Besides the Great Destruction Art, the Great Yin-Yang Heaven Creation Art has an even more formidable technique called the Heaven-Earth Annihilation. I spent half my life studying the Great Yin-Yang Heaven Creation Art before I was able to comprehend this supreme art. Back then, I always attempted to push the Great Yin-Yang Heaven Creation Art to an even higher level, to surpass the creator of the Great Yin-Yang Heaven Creation Art, but I only succeeded after half my life. The Great Yin-Yang Heaven Creation Art truly does have an even higher level, but it's not something that a single person can use. It required two people who had reached an extremely high level of the Great Yin-Yang Heaven Creation Art to use it at the same time. Only then would it be able to move all things in the world, the essence of the Great Thousand Worlds, and destroy all. This was the highest level of the Great Yin-Yang Heaven Creation Art. Even a nuance realm expert would be able to destroy it. However, in the first half of my life, all my disciples have been traitorous, so I never had a chance to use the Heaven-Earth Annihilation Art, nor did I ever see the light of day. Your cultivation has already reached the peak of the Great Yin-Yang Heaven Creation Art. You can use the Great Destruction Art, and you also have the foundation to use the Heaven-Earth Annihilation Art. Next, I will use the stellar energy you just transferred to me, and the Myriad Spirit Sea Art to simulate the Great Yin-Yang Heaven Creation Art. Together with you, we will use the Heaven-Earth Annihilation Art. The power of this secret art is immense, but I have never used it before. Even I can't estimate what kind of risks there will be in the process. But right now we no longer have any better ideas. If we wait until he has completely comprehended the power of the subtle realm, it will be useless even if you use a psychic attack on him. We only have one chance, and the Heaven-Earth Annihilation Art is our last chance. The evil emperor's robes fluttered, his hair rustling. At this moment, Wang Chong was even more excited than the evil emperor. The simple words Heaven-Earth Annihilation Art were like a boulder that had been thrown into Wang Chong's mind, stirring massive waves. Wang Chong had always believed that the Great Destruction Art was the limit of the Great Yin-Yang Heaven Creation Art. He had never imagined, much less known, that the Great Destruction Art contained another technique, the Heaven-Earth Annihilation Art. Moreover, it was a supreme technique that could be used by two experts of the Great Yin-Yang Heaven Creation Art. The demonic emperor old man had never mentioned this to him before. Countless thoughts flew through Wang Chang's mind, but a moment later, as he glanced at the distant golden energy and the recovering Kateba, all these thoughts vanished, and Wang Chang's eyes hardened. Master, I understand. It doesn't matter what the risks are. I will do my best to cooperate with Master in using the heaven-earth annihilation art. The evil emperor nodded, his eyes exuding a dazzling light. Chong'er, listen well. Yin and Yang are the same principle. The heavens and the earth work together. Embrace Yin and carry Yang, and all things begin anew. The evil emperor's mellow voice resounded in Wang Chang's mind, and the highest technique of the great Yin-Yang heaven creation art, the heaven-earth annihilation art, rang out. Wang Chang's heart chilled. He knew that time was of the essence, and he focused on listening. This technique was more profound than any technique that Wang Chang had cultivated in the past, and cultivating it normally would have taken a very long time. But both Wang Chang and the evil emperor had completely comprehended the great Yin-Yang heaven creation art and understood its secrets. Now that they had reached the peak of this art, cultivating the heaven-earth annihilation art would require far less time and energy. Chong'er, I will now explain to you the crux and essence of the heaven-earth annihilation art. Listen carefully. I will only explain it once. Once Kateba finishes absorbing the energy, no matter what you have prepared, we will have to use it, or else we will all die. The evil emperor imprinted the principles and method of using the heaven-earth annihilation art into Wang Chang's mind, explaining the most crucial points in detail. Boom! The evil emperor had barely finished explaining when a massive boom came from the distance. Kateba's body trembled, a majestic wave of stellar energy erupting from his body, completely different from before. All of you back off. Kateba's expression was cold and aloof, his eyes frigid. Let's go. Abu Muslim, Ziad, and Huashu Wazong released their arms at almost the same time. Their bodies swayed as they descended from the sky, leaped onto their horses and galloped away. Assisting Kateba had consumed almost all the energy in their bodies, and all of them were pale. Even getting onto their horses was rather difficult. We've done what we should. Now it's up to Kateba. Everyone, get farther away, so that you don't get caught up in the shock waves. Chapter 1167. Abu Muslim didn't know what had happened to Kateba, but he could sense that the energy in Kateba's body had undergone a massive transformation. Abu Muslim felt like a blazing flame was burning in his body, and this blazing sun was only getting stronger and stronger. This was not the energy they were sending to Kateba, but an even higher, more terrifying, and more destructive energy. Everything depends on you. No matter what, we have to win this battle. With this thought in mind, Abu Muslim quickly turned his head and urged his horse forward. This place had already become a battleground, and if everything went as expected, Kateba would begin a massacre. In their current condition, they would not be able to survive such an explosion. Village Chief Lord Gao, all of you retreat to the rear as well. Wang Chong shouted at almost the same time. The village chief's condition was extremely severe, and Gao Xianji had consumed a great deal of stellar energy in the previous battle. Most importantly, Wang Chong hoped that if something went wrong, at least Gao Xianji, the pillar of the Tang dynasty, would be able to survive. Everyone fall back, Wang Chong immediately ordered as he gazed at Kateba, who was slowly drawing back his energy. This was the final battle, and a victor between the Tang dynasty and the Arabs had to emerge victorious. In a battle of this level, the strength of ordinary soldiers, even elite soldiers like the Divine Martial Army and Divine Prison Army, was insignificant. Rumble. With Wang Chang's order, the Tang dynasty soldiers that had been clashing with the Arabs near the first defense line immediately began to retreat like the receding tide. All of them had a deep unease and concern on their faces, but they also had a deep trust in each other. The Tang dynasty was in an extremely bad situation. The existence of Arab war god Kateba was like the deepest nightmare that loomed over all of them. When a person's strength reached a certain level, it was enough to make anyone despair, and Kateba was undoubtedly this sort of person. No one knew the final outcome of this battle, But towards Wang Chong and the evil emperor, everyone had a deep sense of trust. If the Tang dynasty could still win, the only people who could defeat Kataba were them. Bang! A golden battle boot, incomparably gorgeous, exuding boundless power and majesty, suddenly stepped out. Kataba strode through the air toward Wang Chong and the evil emperor, his steps confident and confident, each step seemingly imbued with the power of 1,000 June. What was an abyss to many martial artists was like flat ground beneath Kataba's feet. As Kataba walked over, an enormous gale of energy erupted from his body. As Wang Chong looked through the world of energy, he could immediately see that the rampaging energy in Kataba's body had suddenly stabilized. The golden string of energy that connected Kataba to the depths of spacetime also grew from the thickness of a chopstick to the thickness of a chopstick. With the support of this energy, Kataba was recovering with astonishing speed. I don't care who you are or how you struggle. Today, all of you are dead. Kataba's icy voice thundered through the air. Crack! Kacha! Kataba clenched his fists, his knuckles cracking. At almost the same time, a vast killing intent surged through the air, stirring up the air and engulfing Wang Chong and the demonic emperor old man. In a flash, the temperature plummeted, and the atmosphere on the battlefield of Talas became tense. The muscles of Wang Chong and the evil emperor tensed up like taut bows, ready to counterattack at any moment. Chonger, remember what your master just told you. You only have one chance. You can't afford to make the slightest mistake. The demonic emperor old man lowered his voice, his expression grave. Understood. Wang Chong nodded. No one noticed that he had made a tiny gesture with his finger. Kataba, come. Wang Chong quickly raised his head and stared at the approaching Kataba, his unyielding face showing no intention of backing down. Let us see whether the Tang dynasty or Arabia is the true ruler of this continent. Bang! Wang Chong and his master, the evil emperor, suddenly shot forward, their minds connected. One on the left, the other on the right, they charged at Kataba. Bang! Bang! Two enormous waves of energy exploded, one in front of the other, clashing with Kataba's killing intent as an equal. The three different auras tangled together, and even the void began to distort under the effect of this power. As the three energies clashed, the battlefield suddenly fell so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Countless eyes turned to Wang Chong, the evil emperor, and Kataba. Even the slowest person understood that the crucial moment of this battle had arrived. Victory and defeat would be decided in an instant, and it would be decided between Kataba, Wang Chong, and the evil emperor. The battles between ordinary soldiers had already become insignificant. Once the battle between Wang Chong and the demonic emperor old man and Kataba was decided, the outcome of this war would be decided. This long and drawn-out war would finally decide the victor and the loser. Whoosh! The winds howled over the battlefield, and the air was somber and somber. For what seemed like both a second and like countless centuries, Kataba, Wang Chong, and the evil emperor faced off against each other. But a moment later, boom! There was a heaven-shaking boom as an unimaginably powerful energy exploded from Kataba's body. Crack! With Kataba at the center, the space in a radius of several thousand feet shattered like glass, thousands of cracks appearing in it. Several hundred jong from Kataba, an Arab horseman, happened to be caught off guard by one of the spatial cracks. Bang! The horseman, along with his horse and armor, was pulverized before he could even make a single sound. Retreat! Hurry and retreat! The Arab and Uzan generals grimaced at this sight, and they immediately urged their armies to retreat. They had originally believed that Kataba's targets were Wang Chong and the evil emperor, and that as long as they were several hundred feet away, they would be able to avoid the shockwaves of the battle. But before the battle had even begun, Kataba's first move had already begun to send shockwaves through his own army. Easy, Wang! In an instant, the army of tens of thousands was thrown into chaos, and all of them retreated. At almost the same time, countless tiny cracks began to appear on the steel walls across from Kataba. Bang! Just like the Arab horsemen who had vanished, these steel walls that weighed more than 10,000 jin exploded into powder. All soldiers retreat! At the same time, the steel walls were pulverized by those spatial cracks that had spread out like tree roots. Gao Xianji, Cheng Qianli, Shi Yuanqing, and the others all turned grave as they ordered their armies to retreat. As they were retreating, everyone heard Kataba's cold and aloof voice. "Meet your destiny." There was a massive boom that drowned out all other sounds in the world. In a flash, the space within 100 feet of Kataba was pulverized and plunged into darkness. Even Wang Chong and the evil emperor were engulfed by this darkness. And in the center of this darkness, a golden light thousands of times more dazzling than the sun soared into the sky. The godlike figure of Kataba suddenly vanished, replaced by a blazing sun several dozen feet in radius in the depths of the darkness. "Look over there." An Arab horseman raised his head to the highest point of Kataba's sword chi, a look of extreme shock in his eyes. His words attracted everyone's attention, and countless gazes looked towards the highest point in the sky. In the next moment, cries of surprise rang out on the battlefield, and everyone's faces involuntarily became extremely shocked. Above Kataba's blazing sun, at the highest point of the sky, ripples of space and time appeared. Kataba's sword had not only cleaved through the sky, but also seemed to pierce through countless spacetime to connect to some unknown and mysterious world. In the depths of that world, suns of the same nature as Kataba's aura hung in the sky, exactly the same as the spacetime that Wang Chong had seen in the world of energy. Kataba's sword had broken through spacetime and connected to the spacetime of the subtle realm. As the dreadful energy of that world leaked out, everyone paled and felt a dreadful pressure. It was like the end of the world had arrived. Rumble. In a flash, that sword that could connect the heavens and earth slashed down with astonishing speed. This sword had already surpassed the realm of thought. Even the fastest martial artists would find it impossible to dodge, much less block. And when this sword slashed down, even the world seemed to burn. No, it didn't seem like it was burning, but actually burning. As Kataba's sword slashed down, countless golden flames appeared in the world. All the air began to burn. And this was only the beginning. Crack. The moment Kataba attacked, the earth quaked and a massive black fissure appeared beneath Kataba, piercing through the Arab army to the west and the Tang dynasty army to the east. Chapter 1168. In a flash, everyone paled. Kataba's attack was far more powerful than they had imagined, making them instinctively feel fear from the depths of their hearts. "Wang Chong, watch out." In the distance, Gao Xinji's face was covered in panic. He had never imagined that Kataba, in his heavily injured state, would still be able to display such terrifying strength. Not even at his peak condition would have been able to take this attack. Chief of Wuxiang, Cheng Qianli, Shi Yuanqing, and the king of Gonka all paled at this sight, their hearts sinking. Victory! No one can take this attack. In the end, we've still won. At almost the same time, in the distance, Abu Muslim's eyes flashed, and he clenched his fists with an excited expression. Far too many surprises had occurred in this battle, and the situation had fluctuated so much that Abu Muslim had believed that the Arabs were about to lose. But in the end, Kataba had not disappointed. With this one attack, the Arabs had obtained the final victory, utterly crushing these Eastern infidels. "Kataba, I knew you could do it. You really didn't disappoint us." In the rear of the army, Dalwin Ruozan rode a highland steed, his hair and robes flapping in the wind. After yesterday's defeat, Dalwin Ruozan had done all he could to prevent the Arabs from leaving, not because he was supremely confident in his own intelligence. As the saying goes, one man can defeat 10 men with brute force. No matter how brilliant a plan was, it still needed to be matched with power. True wisdom was to borrow everything that could be borrowed, including power. And Kataba was the strength that Dalwin Ruozan needed to borrow for his plan. As long as he could defeat the Tang dynasty, Dalwin Ruozan was almost certain that the Tang dynasty would not be able to recover for the next few decades. More importantly, countless elites of the Tang dynasty had gathered in this battle. If the Tang dynasty was still defeated in this battle, it would undoubtedly deal an unprecedented blow to the Central Plains, dealing a blow to the morale and confidence of the Central Plains. and Uzun was certain to benefit from this battle, completely altering the balance of power between the Arabs and the Tang dynasty. Wang Chong, although it's very regretful to lose a rival like you, perhaps this sort of funeral is the best ending for you. Daluan Ruozan looked up at the sky and said to himself, bang! Just when all the Tang people's hearts were sinking in Uzun, and the Arabs were reinvigorated, everyone heard a heaven-shaking boom. No one knew what was going on. But a moment later, the world for several dozen li around Talas was plunged into darkness. This sudden phenomenon caught everyone off guard. Abu Muslim, Daluan Ruozan, and Huashu Wazong instantly froze, and even Qutayba grimaced. Heaven and earth formed together, all things perished together. At this moment a voice rang out in the air. In the next moment, boom boom, two earth-shattering explosions rang out in the air. Under the gazes of countless people, there was a flash of light, and a huge blazing sun suddenly appeared in the center of the extreme darkness. Soon after, in a place not far away, there was a flash of light, and the void trembled. Another huge red moon also appeared. For the first time on the foreign battlefield of Talas, the sun and moon shone together. To countless ordinary people, the sun and moon that they could only look up to had descended to the mortal world at the same time. But this sun and moon were not bursting with the vitality of all things, but yin and yang, soft and hard. Two different natures, but they both possessed destructive powers. The crux of the great yin-yang heaven creation art lay in yin and yang. Everything in the world was governed by the principles of yin and yang. The essence of heaven and earth mutual destruction was to push the principles of yin and yang to their limits, and use them to create the most powerful destructive energy. This was the crux of the battle between Wang Chong and the evil emperor against Qutayba. Qutayba die. Wang Chong's voice resounded through the air. For the first time, he had used the great yin-yang heaven creation art to convert all his stellar energy into extreme yang, while the evil emperor had used the myriad spirit sea art to convert Wang Chong's spirit sea into his own, simulating extreme yin. These two supreme great generals had pushed their strength to the limit, and then clashed against each other. Boom! In the time it takes for a spark to fly off a flint, under the gazes of countless people, the sun and the moon that descended to the mortal world fiercely collided. The world fell silent. The moment the sun and moon collided, time and space seemed to stop, and then the world began to crumble and shatter. When Wang Chong and the evil emperor's sun and moon collided, it seemed like a fissure had been torn open in the world, and an unimaginably dreadful energy surged out and rumbled toward Qutayba. This energy was so vast that Qutayba's attack seemed insignificant. Boom! There was a heaven-shaking boom, as that dreadful energy infused with the origin of the world roared and shattered Qutayba's attack with a single blow. The golden light in the sky vanished, and even Qutayba's blazing sun was destroyed. Ah! With a shrill scream, the golden light that filled the sky, along with the sun and moon, as well as the terrifying destructive power, disappeared in an instant. A golden figure with light flowing on the surface of his body flew through the air like a kite with a broken string, leaving behind a huge arc in the sky before falling heavily to the ground. Boom! The moment Qutayba's feet touched the ground, a dreadful energy surged through his feet and into the earth, causing the earth to crack and shatter, sending countless stones flying into the air. Bum bum bum. 1, 2, 3. After several explosions, the place where Qutayba had been standing became a massive crater several dozen feet wide, the surroundings a scene of devastation. Whoosh! Although Qutayba had forcefully channeled that destructive energy into the ground, his chest still trembled, and he vomited blood, his face instantly turning as white as paper. Qutayba's aura also began to rapidly recede, plunging to an astonishing level. No! Impossible! I can't lose to anyone. Qutayba's hair was disheveled, and he seemed deranged. The injuries on his body were extremely severe, but to Qutayba, the most serious was the mental blow. This attack had been Qutayba's strongest attack, and he had believed that victory was in his grasp. He had never imagined that Wang Chong and the evil emperor would explode with energy even more terrifying than his own and tear apart his sword chi. Not only that, but the power even blasted into his body. Even the golden armor on his body was heavily damaged. Chong-er, now is the time. You can't let him escape. The boundless darkness in the air scattered, revealing the demonic emperor old man's figure. He had been paying close attention to Kateba's condition this entire time. Although this barbarian general was unimaginably powerful, he had reached the end of his life. The destructive energy of the heaven-earth annihilation was constantly gnawing away at his vitality. It was time for everything to end. Bang! 2 waves of energy exploded in the air as Wang Chong and the evil emperor lunged toward Kateba. Protect Kateba! In the distance, Abu Muslim's eyes were filled with extreme shock. Even now, he still found it impossible to believe that Kateba had been defeated, but he quickly recovered. In a flash, the tens of thousands of Arab and Yusang soldiers reacted and charged toward the Tang army in a stampede of hooves. Kateba was the soul of the Arab army, the symbol of Arabia's invincibility. Not even Abu Muslim could compare to him. No matter what, he could not die here. Abu Muslim's order was fast, but it was still too slow on the ever-changing battlefield. Kill! Wang Chong and the evil emperor charged at Kateba, one on the left and one on the right. Great art of destruction. Myriad Chi returned to origin. 2 enormous energies hurtled toward Kateba like comets. Boom! Kateba's face contorted in the face of these 2 attacks, but he showed no intention of dodging. A golden bolt of sword chi fiercely collided with their attacks. Li Sai, now is the time. Wang Chong bellowed, you're right. In a flash, several thousand Wuxian cavalry were charging from another direction, their halos beneath their feet. Only now did everyone realize that after Wang Chong and Kateba had concluded their battle, Li Sai and Cui Piaoqi had led the Wuxian cavalry past the first defense line and charged ahead. By the time everyone realized what was happening, they were already close to Kateba. Not good. In the distance, Dalawan Ruozan grimaced at this sight. But no matter what he wanted to do, it was too late. In the Nei, the thousands of Wuxian cavalry transformed into a torrent of steel that charged forward like lightning bolts. Boom! In just a few seconds, these thousands of soldiers had adopted the cutting formation, their stalwart warhorses leaping into the air and shooting toward Kateba like cannonballs. Bum bum bum! Amidst the earth-shattering explosions, countless warhorses charged forward one after another, ramming into the battlefield like raindrops. Clang! In a flash of sword light, Li Sai was the first to strike, his massive sword slashing down on Kateba's back. At almost the same time, Cui Piaoqi slashed down with his sword. Chapter 1169. Thud thud thud. A rain of attacks rained down on Kateba's body. Enough ants could bite an elephant to death, and even Kateba found it difficult to endure such a dense barrage of attacks. His aura continued to weaken. Get out of here. With a howl, Kateba's body exploded with golden light that sent Li Sai, Cui Piaoqi, and the Wuxian cavalry flying. Lions could not endure the humiliation of lambs. Dragons were enraged by the disdain of fish and shrimp. Kateba would never tolerate the offense of these weaklings. But just when Kateba had sent Li Sai's group flying, there was a flash of light, and then a figure as vast as the sea soared into the air and appeared in front of Kateba. Before he could react, a black and heavy sword, imbued with the weight of a mountain, slashed at Kateba's body. The black armored guard had suddenly struck. In the previous battle, the black armored guard had taken the majority of Kateba's attacks. If not for him, the defense line would have collapsed long ago. But even so, the black armored guard had paid a heavy price, and his energy had been greatly depleted. Thus, Wang Chong had not allowed him to participate in the battle just now. But that was then, and this was now. Kateba was no longer as dazzling and invincible as he had been before. Whoosh! This strike caused Kateba's entire body to tremble and vomit blood. He had already been wounded, and now that he had taken a heavy blow from the black armored guard, his aura weakened once more and his injuries worsened. Bastard! All of you will have to pay the price. Kateba's furious voice resounded through the air. But he was cut off before he could finish speaking. Die! A sword of Wuxia steel that could cut through metal suddenly cut through the air and slashed at Qutayba with astonishing speed. Qutayba grimaced, golden light erupting from his body, as he immediately moved to block Wang Chong. But a moment later, boom! Psychic energy as tough as steel slammed into Qutayba's mind. This attack was so sudden that the golden light around Qutayba's body froze, revealing a sliver of an opening. Psychic thrust. Piercing energy. In a few short moments, Wang Chong had launched 2 attacks. The first had slowed down Qutayba's attack and revealed a flaw in his defense, and the second had pierced through his stellar energy. Swish! In a flash of cold light, a large head flew into the air from Qutayba's shoulder. No! My lord! Qutayba! That at this moment time seemed to stop. Abu Muslim, Ziyad, Sesame, Dalawan Ruozan, and the countless charging Arab cavalry all paled and stopped as if they had been plunged into an icehouse. Qutayba, the Arab war god who had fought north and south, and had never suffered a defeat, had actually fallen in the first battle of his conquest of the East. This was a hellish nightmare for all the Arabs. Impossible! How could this be? In the distance, Dalawan Ruozan's mind was in chaos, his hair in disarray. With Qutayba's death, Dalawan Ruozan's dream had been shattered. Ever since the War of the Southwest, Uzan's condition had been deteriorating, and Dalawan Ruozan had placed all his hopes on the Battle of Talas. But now, the dust had settled, and not even Dalawan Ruozan could reverse the situation. But while the Arabs and Tibetans were deathly silent, the great Tang side, after a brief moment of silence, exploded with heaven-shaking cheers. Wang Chong! Wang Chong! Wang Chong! Cheers shook the heavens as everyone went crazy. No one had expected that Wang Chong would be able to lead his army to reverse the situation, not only defeating the Arabs and Uzan, but also killing Qutayba, the greatest threat to the Tang dynasty. Kill! With this order, all the soldiers charged forward. The Tang dynasty had won. After several months of bitter fighting, the Tang dynasty had finally emerged victorious and stood proudly at the summit. Now was the time to reap the fruits of victory. Kill! The first to react were the several thousand remaining Wuxian cavalry. Galloping, the several thousand Wuxian cavalry stabbed into the enemy army like a sharp sword. Aya! Aya! Screams filled the air as countless Arab and Tibetan horsemen were cut down from their horses. Bang! At almost the same time, a massive banner forged from deep-sea Xian iron and some other unknown metal was thrust into the ground. The red and black war banner flapped in the wind. Clang clang clang. Energy began to radiate from the banner, bolstering the Divine Prison Army, Divine Martial Army, Dragon Stallion Army and Tongluo Cavalry, causing majestic halos to appear beneath the feet of the Divine Prison Army, Divine Martial Army, Dragon Stallion Army, and Tongluo Cavalry. Although these halos were no longer as dazzling and resplendent as before, they were still as sharp as ever. Without the slightest hesitation, all the soldiers charged forward at full speed toward the tens of thousands of Arab and Uzan cavalry. In a flash, countless Arab and Uzan cavalry were cut down from their horses and plunged into pools of blood. Retreat! Retreat! Panicked shouts resounded over the battlefield. The army was routed. At this moment, both the Arabs and the Uzan soldiers had lost the will to fight and were routed by the massive assault of the Tang people. Qutayba's death dealt a massive blow to the soldiers, shattering their morale. All of them wanted to run for their lives and get as far away from this nightmarish Talas as possible. They no longer cared about formations or ranks, trampling and slamming into each other, throwing the battlefield into chaos. Ah! Screams filled the air as the Arab and Uzan cavalry were stopped by the army at the front, unable to advance even an inch. The Divine Prison Army, Divine Martial Army, and Wuxian cavalry swiftly caught up to them and cut them down. 5,000, 6,000, 7,000. From the moment the army charged to the moment it began to retreat, the chaos had inflicted grievous casualties on the Tibetan and Arab armies. In the blink of an eye, 7,000 to 8,000 soldiers had died on the battlefield. When an army lost its will to fight, it could no longer be called a war, but a one-sided massacre. When a person was filled with panic, and their mind was in disarray, without the will to fight to the death, They wouldn't even be able to use 50% of their strength. Cries of misery filled the battlefield. Tens of thousands of Uzun and Arab soldiers were felled. In just a few short moments, they had used their own lives and their own deaths to vividly and cruelly display these 4 words. Fire! In the rear, Su Hanshan waved his hand and gave the order. In a flash, long ballista bolts were fired into the panicking Uzun and Arab armies. Plush plush. Squelch squelch squelch. 2 Tibetans and 1 Arab horseman failed to dodge in time, and a ballista bolt pierced through their backs. Like wooden pillars, they dropped to the ground, dead and motionless. Elsewhere, the same thing was happening. While the battle had been going on, Zhang Shouji and his craftsmen had finally managed to produce a batch of ballista bolts. Su Hanshan was even more direct. As long as the ballista bolts weren't too bent, and could still be stuffed into the barrels of the ballista, he would use them. While the Arab and Uzun armies had lost their will to fight, this was the perfect opportunity to reap the harvest. It didn't matter if these ballista bolts could be repaired or not. In this pursuit, killing as many as they could count. Pass on my order. All Mamelukes are to go to the front lines and stop them. Without anyone to hold the rear, we won't be able to retreat unscathed. Abu Muslim was also anxious. In the current situation, it was very difficult for even his orders to restrain the army. Qutaybah's death had dealt a massive blow to all of them. Right now he could only place his hopes on the well-trained, battle-hardened Mamelukes. But Abu Muslim had barely given this order when he heard a shrill scream at his ears. Ah! Abu Muslim's body trembled as he turned his head, only to see a sight that chilled his body and chilled his heart. In the chaos, Uzun Great General Huishu Wuzong had been thrust through the chest by a sword and raised high into the air, blood gushing from his body. Abu Muslim followed the sword and saw a young and familiar figure. Huishu Wuzong, this is what you deserve. Wang Chong stared at Huishu Wuzong, his eyes brimming with killing intent. The cooperation between Huishu Wuzong and Daluan Ruozhen had almost caused Wang Chong to watch as his father, Wang Yen, died on the battlefield of Talas. If he hadn't reacted quickly enough, he would have regretted this for the rest of his life. Thus anyone could leave, but Huishu Wuzong had to die. Clap! An arm covered in blood suddenly reached out and grabbed Wang Chong's arm. Huishu Wuzong's stalwart body was nailed to the sword by Wang Chong. His face was pale, and his aura was like a candle flickering in the wind that could be extinguished at any moment. But there was still a faint smile on his face, as if he had already cast aside his life and death. The winner is the king, and the loser is the thief. That's all. I have nothing else to say. Wang Chong, you truly are our Uzun's greatest enemy. But as a general, to die at your hands, to die on the battlefield, is the fate that a general should have. As a general, I hope that you can agree to a request of mine. Prime Minister is only a scholar. Without my support, he will find it very difficult to threaten you in the future. You have already won this battle. Can you spare Prime Minister and spare his life? Blood flowed down Huishu Wuzong's palm and down his armor, but the smile on his face only deepened and his eyes were calm. It was as if he had long since prepared himself for this conclusion. Only one hand was tightly gripping Wang Chong's sword arm, a pleading look in his eyes. Chapter 1170. Huishu. Ah! Suddenly, a heart-wrenching scream came from afar. Daluan Ruozhen felt like his heart was being pierced by 10,000 arrows as he stared at Wang Chong and Huishu Huizong, who had been held high in the air. At that moment, his mind was completely blank. It was as if his entire soul had been taken away, and his eyes were extremely gloomy. In the War of the Southwest, the cavalry of the Ngari royal lineage, which had been accumulated for decades, had been completely wiped out on the shores of the Arai, and the entire Ngari royal lineage had been turned into a no-man's land. But Daluan Ruozhen's eyes had never dimmed. When the Tsimpo had imprisoned him in the royal capital's dungeon and forced him to live a life of darkness, Daluan Ruozhen's eyes had never dimmed. When the Eagle of the Plateau, Dusong Mangpoch, had died on the battlefield, Daluan Ruozhen's eyes had never dimmed. But when Huishu Wuzong had been pierced through by Wang Chong's sword and raised high into the air, the light in Daluan Ruozhen's eyes had vanished, leaving him bereft of life. Prime Minister, let's go. On the battlefield, the wind was howling, and an anxious shout came from the side. Huaba Senji, leading the remnants of the Mutri Great Cavalry, stared at Dalwan Ruozen's back with concern in his eyes. The Arabs had already been defeated and Kateba had been killed. There was no reason for Uzen's men to remain here. The Tang people could charge at any moment, so the urgent task at hand was to preserve their forces, flee Talas, and return to Uzen. But at this moment, Dalwan Ruozen was in a daze, staring in Huashu Wuzong's direction as if he hadn't heard a thing. You guys hurry over and help Prime Minister onto a warhorse. Immediately withdraw. Huaba Seng's heart was filled with anxiety. He called over 2 Mutri Great Cavalry, and immediately ordered. Yes, 2 Mutri cavalrymen jumped off their horses, and hurriedly helped Dalwan Ruozen onto their horses. Let's go. A moment later, Huaba Senji led Dalwan Ruozen, the remaining Mutri Great Cavalry, and the remaining Uzen cavalry into a cloud of dust as they fled into the distance, not even bothering with the Arabs behind them. As the saying goes, when disaster strikes, everyone flies away. The troops of the Tang dynasty would soon catch up to them. At this time, they could only run for their lives. Huaba Senji and the others were very fast, and in just a short while, they had already run several thousand feet. Abu Muslim couldn't help but give a long sigh, a complicated expression on his face. He knew that the situation was hopeless. Listen to my orders. There's no need to stop them. All soldiers retreat at full speed. With the cooperation of the Uzen cavalry, the Arabs might have been able to hold on for a little longer, save as many soldiers as possible, and then return to Samarkand. But the Western Turks had fled, and now even the Uzen cavalry had fled. Only the Arabs were left on the battlefield, and they could only flee. Gallop! The Arab army was like a mountain, tens of thousands of soldiers casting off their armor, and madly fleeing to the west. Unlike the last few times, there was no resistance, and this was no longer a strategic retreat. There wasn't even a need to sound the retreat horn. Everyone was madly fleeing for their lives. Kail! Kail! A loud shout resounded through the sky, and the war drums rumbled incessantly. Gao Xianji, Cheng Qianli, Shi Yuanqing, Wang Yan, Cui Piaoqi, Li Sai, and the others quickly charged out. At almost the same time, the elite armies of the Divine Martial Army, Divine Prison Army, Dragon Stallion Army, Roaring Tiger Army, and Su Hanshan's Ballista Army surged forward, crossing the first defense line and pursuing the fleeing Arabs. Clang! On the battlefield, Wang Chong slowly drew back his sword and put down Huashu Wuzong's corpse. Someone, take care of Huashu Wuzong's corpse and give him a proper burial. Wang Chong ordered from his horse. Until the very end, Huashu Wuzong had not received a reply from Wang Chong. But when Huaba Senji pulled Dalwan Ruozen away, this renowned general of the southwest of the Uzen Empire, a great general who had once fought against Zhangzhou Jinxiong, finally closed his eyes. As an enemy, Wang Chong had originally been brimming with killing intent, but now that Huashu Wuzong was truly dead, Wang Chong's killing intent had receded, leaving only pure respect for a true great general. Although they were enemies, Huashu Wuzong could still be considered a true soldier. Even in his final moments, he had not been thinking about himself, but the fleeing Dalwan Ruozen. That smile had left a deep impression on Wang Chong. Perhaps this is the best ending for you. As this thought flitted through Wang Chong's mind, he quickly regained his composure and looked into the distance. In that direction, the Arabs and Uzen soldiers were retreating like the tide. Wang Chong's eyes instantly turned sharp. This time, no matter where Abu Muslim fled to, Wang Chong would pursue him to the ends of the earth. He would not give him any time to catch his breath, much less allow him to make a comeback. Hiya! Wang Chong leaped forward, and the white hoof shadow let out a long neigh as it took Wang Chong into the air. With a single step, it covered more than 100 feet in pursuit. With Wang Chong's departure, all the forces of the Tang dynasty and Talas were mobilized. Even the nomads of the mercenary tribes of the western regions, who had long ago charged back excitedly, gathering up their livestock and charging with the army. It truly is a divine weapon. It truly is a divine weapon. A herdsman from the western regions wearing a white turban was so excited that his entire body was trembling. The great Tang had truly given them a pleasant surprise. Whether it was the ambush of Kataba, with the myriad Rakshasa earthen stronghold formation, or that final heaven-shaking battle, the Tang dynasty had not leaked any information beforehand, deceiving even their allies. But at this time, no one complained about this. As long as they could defeat Arabia and win this war, that was enough. The war should be carried out by those responsible for the war. Hear my order. Teams 2 and 3, dismantle the steel walls. Team 1, load up all the steel on transport carriages and prepare to follow the army. Zhang Shouji's hair and beard flew in the wind, his elderly eyes bright as snow. After working with Wang Chong so many times, Zhang Shouji was no longer a simple engineer, nor was he completely ignorant of the affairs of war. After several months of stalemate, Zhang Shouji sensed that this pursuit would not easily stop. It would be an unprecedented pursuit, and the steel walls of the city of Talas would play an enormous role in Wang Chong's future battles. Once the city of Talas collapsed, there would be no value in defending this place. The barren land was not even good for grazing cattle. No matter what, this place was no longer worth defending. Given Wang Chong's personality, the defense line was assuredly pushed forward. This was a tacit understanding that had been forged between the two sides for a long time. Kill, with the Wuxian cavalry and Tongluo cavalry as the vanguard, the rest of the army in the rear, and the shepherds and craftsmen bringing up the rear. An unprecedented pursuit began from Talas. The army pursued day and night, and even top-class armies like the Divine Prison Army, Divine Martial Army, and Dragon Stallion Army had given up on foot and switched to horses to pursue the Arabs. In normal circumstances, this would have been a major taboo, and it would have been detrimental to the power of these top-class armies. But at a time like this, any sort of tactic was no longer important. This was because all the Arab cavalry had lost their will to fight. For the first time in the East, these fearless Arabs who lived by fighting had encountered an opponent more valiant and skilled in battle. For the first time, they had tasted an unprecedented defeat. Prime Minister, let's go. The stone bridge is up ahead. As long as we can get past it, we can cut it down, and then follow greater and lesser valor back to the Uzun Plateau, and escape the pursuit of the Tang people. Huoba Senji anxiously called out. The Tang people's pursuit this time had been far more ferocious than imagined. As they fled from the battlefield of Talas, the roars of the Tang people had never ceased. This time, they had apparently decided that they would not rest until the Uzun and the Arabs were completely exterminated. Huoba Senji had a proud nature, and he had originally come for the sake of the Mutri Great Cavalry and the reputation of all the people of Uzun. But now, he didn't even dare to turn his head. The energies of Wang Chong, Gao Xinji, the Black Armored Guard, and Cheng Qianli were like a storm, and no one in all of Uzun could contend against them. Even someone as proud as Dama Trimo had taken up his Buddhist saber and fled with all his might. As for Abu Muslim and Ziyad, because they had been transferring energy to Kataba, they were extremely weak and didn't even have the time to rest or recover. In this state, Uzun and the Arabs no longer had the right to fight with the Tang dynasty. Dayan Ersongrong, lead an army to harass the Arabs and slow them down a little. The Tang's attention is completely focused on the Arabs. The longer they are in a state of confusion, the more chance we have to survive. Huoba Senji suddenly turned his head and looked at Dayan Er. Although Dusong Mangpoj and Huoshu Wazong had died in battle, the Uzun still had some fresh soldiers. Understood. Upon hearing this, Dayan Ersongrong immediately turned his head and led his army in a charge against the Arabs. The Arabs had been stopped by Dayan Ersongrong in this charge, and the soldiers in the rear were much slower, creating a scene of utter chaos. In the past, Huoba Senji would have never dared to do this, but now that the war had been lost, the two sides were no longer allies. As long as the Prime Minister and himself returned to Uzun, nothing else mattered. Go! Everyone go! Once we cross the stone bridge, immediately cut off this place. Chapter 1171. Prime Minister, let's go. I'll hold the rear for you. Huoba Senji turned his head to the rear. The Tang dynasty's soldiers were approaching with astonishing speed, the screams of the Arabs echoing through the heavens. Even to the people of Uzan, it was a dreadful sight. If they did not flee, it would soon be their turn. What are you standing around for? Hurry and escort the Prime Minister away. Huoba Senji pointed at the two Mutri great cavalry. Huoba. Suddenly, a calm and wise voice sounded in his mind, interrupting Huoba Senji's order. These two ordinary words made Huoba Senji's heart skip a beat, and he had an extremely ill foreboding. For some reason, Huoba Senji could sense from Daluan Ruozen's voice that he could see through life and death. Prime Minister, let's talk about this after we get back. Did you two bastards not hear what I said? Huoba Senji's eyes widened, and before Daluan Ruozen could finish speaking, he rebuked the two Mutri great cavalry. Huoba Senji, let's part ways here. Daluan Ruozen suddenly said, as he looked up at Huoba Senji from his horse. His voice was abnormally calm amidst the sounds of fighting, so calm that Huoba Senji felt uneasy. Prime Minister, what nonsense are you saying? Let's go. Huoba Senji's eyes widened, as if he had predicted something. Haha, Huoba, there's no need to say more. More than 100,000 soldiers have died in battle, and the Mutri great cavalry have suffered grievous losses. Someone has to take responsibility for all this. Moreover, Dusong Mengpoj and Huashu Wazong have both died here. Even if we return to Uzan, do you think that the Tsempo will let us go? Daluan Ruozen faintly smiled, his expression growing even calmer. Prime Minister. Huoba Senji was stunned. His heart was full of words, but he couldn't utter a single word in front of Daluan Ruozen's simple words. Huoba, go. Only if I stay will you be able to survive. My era has ended. In the future, Uzan can only rely on you. Tell the Tsempo that I have done my best. Daluan Ruozen's gaze seemed to see through everything. He took one last look at Huoba Senji, pulled the reins, and immediately turned around. Wang Chong, do you dare to come out and meet me? Daluan Ruozen's loud voice resounded throughout the battlefield. He slapped the back of his horse and quickly disappeared into the surging army. Prime Minister. Behind him, Huoba Senji stared blankly at that confident and emotional figure, unable to speak for a long time. At the same time, Daluan Ruozen's words caused the Tang dynasty army pursuing the Arabs to fall into chaos. It's Daluan Ruozen. What other tricks does this bastard want to play? Qianli, take some men and stop him. Mounted on a white warhorse, Gao Xianji immediately noticed Daluan Ruozen galloping over. Gao Xianji was wary of Daluan Ruozen. Although Daluan Ruozen was a purely civil minister, if not for him, this war would never have become so complicated, and the Arabs, Uzan, and Western Turks would never have formed an alliance. In the final battle, when the god avatars of Wang Yan and Cheng Qianli had been destroyed, the entire Tang dynasty had almost collapsed. Gao Xianji was almost certain that Daluan Ruozen had played a significant role in this, and that he had even been the one to devise the entire plan. Although he couldn't think of any tricks Daluan Ruozen could play in these circumstances, Gao Xianji was almost instinctively wary of him. Wait a moment, let me. Suddenly, a voice came from the distance. Wang Chong, riding on the white-hoofed shadow, slowed down as he weaved through the dense army. Shui Qianjun, pass on my order. Have Cui Piaoqi continue the pursuit. As for Daluan Ruozen, leave him to me. Without my order, no one is allowed to touch him. Daluan Ruozen's actions were far too abnormal, but unlike Gao Xianji, Wang Chong did not believe that he could play any tricks at this time. Dusong Mengpoj was dead, Huashu Wazong was dead, and Wang Chong had even killed Kateba. No matter how clever Daluan Ruozen was, there was nothing he could do to reverse the situation. Whoosh! Following Wang Chong's order, the entire army was thrown into turmoil. Like water crashing into a reef, all the soldiers parted to the sides before encountering Daluan Ruozen. Wang Chong's order was perfectly carried out. The Wuxiang cavalry, the Tongluo cavalry, the Divine Prison Army, the Divine Martial Army, the Ballista Army, all the soldiers acted as if they hadn't seen him, circling around Daluan Ruozen and continuing the pursuit. A portion of the army naturally remained at Wang Chong's side. All of this had been accomplished in the blink of an eye. After successive battles and successive victories, Wang Chong had established an extremely high prestige in the army. Even the Tongluo cavalry, who had had some conflicts with Wang Chong, chose to obey Wang Chong's orders. Gallop! The hoofs of the Highland steed kicked up a cloud of dust as it slowly rode forward with Dalawan Ruozan. Before them were piles of corpses, some Arab, some Uzan, and the stench of blood permeated the air. Dalawan Ruozan's expression was calm and indifferent, and his body seemed to exude an invisible force that attracted everyone's attention. Yuanqing Lushi, lead the army and continue the pursuit. I'll stay here and keep an eye on Dalawan Ruozan. Gao Xinji frowned. He suddenly stopped and ordered, "Don't worry." The evil emperor-in-chief of Wuxiang couldn't help but slightly slow down, frowning as they gazed at the distant Dalawan Ruozan. But when they saw Dalawan Ruozan's eyes, they seemed to understand something, and their thick brows slowly relaxed as they fell silent. Hiya! As he watched Dalawan Ruozan slowly gallop over, Wang Chong's eyes flashed, and he urged his horse forward. As Wang Chong and Dalawan Ruozan approached, the surroundings fell silent as countless gazes gathered on them. Even the most ignorant person would have some understanding of the grudge between Wang Chong and Dalawan Ruozan, their mortal enemies. In the War of the Southwest, Wang Chong had risen to fame because of Dalawan Ruozan, and now, on the distant battlefield of Talas, the two had once more met in a fateful encounter. Gallop! 10 some paces from each other, Wang Chong and Dalawan Ruozan both stopped, their eyes meeting in silence. It seemed like only a moment, but it also seemed like countless long centuries. Finally, everyone heard a long sigh. The winner is the king, and the loser is the thief. Wang Chong, you've won this battle. Starting from now, for 10 some years, no one on the continent will be able to compare to you, and no one will be able to contend against the Tang dynasty. Dalawan Ruozan suddenly said. The fierce winds blew at his robes, but Dalawan Ruozan's heart was in turmoil. You shouldn't have come to this battle in the first place. Wang Chong calmly said. The final result of this battle might have been an accident in Dalawan Ruozan's view, but in Wang Chong's view, it was inevitable. Dalawan Ruozan had no idea how much effort he had put into this battle, how much preparation he had made. From the moment Wuxiang had constructed the city, this battle had begun. Dalawan Ruozan was fighting a battle he was certain to lose. Dalawan Ruozan only chuckled, his expression indifferent, as if he could see through everything. How could I not come? Whether it was for myself or for Uzan, I had to win Talas. But the winner is the king, and the loser is the thief. I've lost, so I have nothing to say. Wang Chong fell silent. Just as Dalawan Ruozan had said, the winner is the king, and the loser is the thief. This was a principle that all generals understood and abided by. Although Dalawan Ruozan had truly caused him no small amount of trouble, even Wang Chong had to admit that Dalawan Ruozan was an opponent worthy of respect. Wang Chong, I've done all I could in this battle. I don't regret losing to you, nor do I have any regrets. I've spent half my life on the battlefield, taking pride in my intelligence, and rarely encountering an opponent. Although I'm not very strong, even Zhangqiu Jinxiong has to retreat in front of me. I've spent several decades in the southwest, but I've never achieved anything. Wang Chong, you are the first and only person to have forced me into such a desperate situation. Dalawan Ruozan looked at Wang Chong, his eyes devoid of hatred, only pride and pride. Putting aside their countries and standpoints, to be able to encounter a true opponent in his life was, in a sense, a kind of fortune. At the very least, he had no regrets. Wang Chong, can you agree to a request of mine? Dalawan Ruozan suddenly asked. Seeing Wang Chong's slight frown, Dalawan Ruozan faintly smiled and continued. Be at ease. I will no longer be your opponent. Give me Huishu Wuzong's corpse. I'll stay here and do whatever you want to me. I beg of you. As he said the last 2 words, the smile on Dalawan Ruozan's face slowly receded. He bowed slightly and looked at Wang Chong, a pleading look in his eyes. In that instant, that peerless, masterful, and spirited Uzan minister of wisdom had disappeared. What appeared before Wang Chong was an ordinary, lowly, and insignificant Dalawan Ruozan. Boom! Gao Xianji, Cheng Qianli, Li Sai, and Xue Qianjun were all stunned by this sight. Even Wang Chong's eyes showed a hint of emotion. Everyone heard Daluan Ruozen's words clearly. No one expected that Daluan Ruozen would disregard his own life at a time like this for Huashu Wuzong's corpse. What was even more unexpected was that he would lower his head in front of Wang Chong for Huashu Wuzong's corpse. Daluan Ruozen was proud and conceited. In this world, there was probably no one who could make him lower his head so easily. Even Gao Xinji was far from being able to do so. However, for Huashu Wuzong's corpse, he abandoned his pride and lowered his proud head. Chapter 1172. Can I? Daluan Ruozen asked again, a hint of pleading in his voice. I've known Huashu Wuzong my whole life, and he's always been by my side. I can't fulfill my promise to him, but at least let me send him back to Uzan and give him a proper burial, okay? Wang Chong looked at the deathly gray in Daluan Ruozen's eyes, and suddenly, he remembered Huashu Wuzong's last words. He let out a long sigh in his heart, and finally urged his horse to retreat. He had fought with Daluan Ruozen for so long, and faced with this last request, Wang Chong could not refuse. Men, bring Huashu Wuzong's body here. In just a moment, a few cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty, leading a horse with Huashu Wuzong's body on it, galloped from the rear of the army. Marquis. The cavalryman stepped forward and handed Huashu Wuzong's body to Daluan Ruozen, and quickly retreated. Wang Chong looked at Daluan Ruozen silently. The latter seemed to have seen nothing, and felt nothing. From the moment Huashu Wuzong appeared, his attention was completely attracted. The faint smile on Daluan Ruozen's lips had disappeared, and he slowly urged his horse forward. His face was always calm, and when he looked at Huashu Wuzong's body on the horse's back, he suddenly revealed a deep sorrow and sorrow. Huashu Wuzong was wearing a fiery red armor. Even in death, his burly body still gave people a feeling of tall and valiant. However, his face was pale, and there was no sign of life in his body. Wang Chong, can you tell me what he said in the end? Daluan Ruozen raised his head and said. Wang Chong let out a long sigh. Without hiding anything, he told him exactly what Huashu Wuzong had said before he died. At that moment, looking at Huashu Wuzong on horseback, Daluan Ruozen's body trembled, and 2 streams of tears flowed down his face. Huashu, I'm sorry. In this battle, I misspoke. Huashu Wuzong lowered his head, his body trembling. The scenes of the past once again flashed before his eyes. On the Uzan Plateau, the young Huashu Wuzong was glaring at him like a tiger cub. I, Huashu Wuzong, am the dragon and tiger of the plateau. Even if it's the Tsimpo's order, I will never bow to a mere scholar like you. Haha, so what if you're a dragon and tiger? Dragons, you can't ascend to the heavens. Tigers, you can't enter the earth. You're just an ordinary man of strength, and you can't accomplish anything. What use are you? You. Haha, what about you? Did I say something wrong? A mere scholar without the strength to truss a chicken. You can't even defeat my subordinates. What use are you? Do you know how to rule the country and bring peace to the world? Do you know how to devise strategies and decide victory over the world? Do you know how to unite the vertical and horizontal, befriend the distant and attack the nearby? How does Milord plan to revitalize the Uzan Plateau? 30 years. What can't he do? Milord doesn't even have the strength to truss a chicken. I'm afraid that's just wishful thinking. Ha, don't we have you? Huashu, we've lost again. The Tang dynasty is stronger than we imagined. Are you going to give up? No, I'll never give up. The Uzan Plateau is still too weak. Give me 30 years, and I'll definitely make the Uzan Plateau the strongest existence. Since that's the case, if Prime Minister doesn't mind, let me be your right-hand man for 30 years. Scenes of the past flashed past his eyes like lightning. Looking at Huashu Wuzong's pale corpse, Daluan Ruozen's tears kept flowing. Huashu, this time I've harmed you. You and I have known each other for half of our lives. Let me accompany you. The 2 of you listen up. Immediately send General Huashu Wuzong's corpse to the plateau. If anything goes wrong, bring his head back. Yes. 2 of Daluan Ruozen's loyal guards seemed to realize something. They lowered their heads in unison, their eyes showing a trace of sorrow. Wang Chong, being able to exchange blows with you is the greatest pride of my life. Dalawan Ruozan took a deep breath. Looking at Wang Chong, his eyes regained some of their vigor. Don't worry. You won't regret this deal. Dalawan Ruozan faintly smiled, once more returning to that energetic and wise minister of the past. Imperial Minister, Senpo, Dalawan Ruozan doesn't have the face to see you. In 2 campaigns, 400,000 Uzun cavalry died. Dalawan Ruozan can only atone for his sins with death. Chi. Before Wang Chong could react, Dalawan Ruozan suddenly drew his sword and slashed it across his own neck. In an instant, a fountain of blood spurted into the sky. Dalawan Ruozan's expression was calm. He raised his head high and gazed into the depths of the sky, gazing into the distance. Finally, his eyes lost focus and he slowly fell from his horse. Pung! As his slender body slowly and heavily fell to the ground, dust rose into the air. At this moment, the entire battlefield seemed to have fallen silent. Gao Xianji, Cheng Qianli, Li Sai, Xue Qianjun and everyone else were stunned by this sight. The famous minister of the Uzun Empire, the most renowned sage of the Ngari royal lineage, the man who had stood in the way of the tiger of the empire, Zhangqiu Jinqiong, had died in front of everyone in such a tragic manner. Prime Minister. At this moment, on that long and narrow stone bridge far away, Huoba Senji's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. He suddenly let out a heart-wrenching scream. Wang Chong, one day, you will pay the price for today. The Uzun Empire will not lose. One day, I will avenge the Prime Minister and the General. Marquis, let me take some men to kill him. The Uzun Empire has lost all its elites, and they don't have Dalawan Ruozan or Huoshu Wuzong. As long as we launch a surprise attack and catch up to them, there is still a high chance that we can kill Huoba Senji and the soldiers of the Uzun Empire and eliminate all future troubles. A voice suddenly came from behind. Li Sai suddenly took a step forward and looked in the direction of Huoba Senji on the stone bridge with a cold glint in his eyes. At almost the same time, though the king of Gonka said nothing, he also took 2 steps forward. It was obvious that as long as Li Sai moved, the king of Gonka would definitely work with him. Given the strength of the two, there was an extremely high chance that they could kill Huoba Senji. After experiencing so many battles, Wang Chong's prestige in the Tang army had soared like the noon sun, and after his battle with Kateba, no one could compare to him. In this aspect, not even veteran generals like Gao Xianji or Qing Qianli could compare to him. For Huoba Senji to dare to threaten Wang Chong in front of so many people was simply suicidal. Forget it. Let him do as he pleases, Wang Chong calmly said. This person doesn't have the bravery of Huoshu Wuzong or the intelligence of Dalawan Ruozan. He's just angry at Dalawan Ruozan's death. He's not much of a threat to the Tang dynasty. After saying this, Wang Chong lowered his head to look at Dalawan Ruozan's corpse. For some reason, even though he had killed Huoshu Wuzong and dealt with the powerful foe that was Dalawan Ruozan, Wang Chong felt no joy or excitement. On the contrary, he felt a faint, indescribable sense of loss and sorrow. Pass on my order. Return the corpses of Huoshu Wuzong and Dalawan Ruozan to Uzun. All the remaining Uzun cavalry, as long as they don't deliberately attack, are to be released. No one is to attack. Wang Chong sighed. Yes, your subordinate will go. Around Wang Chong, whether it was Li Sai, the King Gonka, or any of the other generals, all lowered their heads in submission. Wang Chong waved his hand, and several of his men dismounted. They helped Dalawan Ruozan's corpse onto their horses and rode off. By the stone bridge, a group of Uzun soldiers grief-stricken received the corpses of Dalawan Ruozan and Huoshu Wuzong. Without another word, they mounted their horses and rode off, quickly vanishing into the distance. Rumble, in an instant with a loud sound, the long stone bridge in the distance broke at its base, falling heavily into the abyss. Wang Chong silently watched from a distance, saying nothing. Let's go. Wang Chong took in a deep breath and led his army into the distance. The matter of Uzun had come to an end, but the matter of the Arabs was far from over. No one understood better than Wang Chong just how much of a threat this massive empire on the western border could pose to the Great Tang. If he didn't strike while the iron was hot and completely crush it, he would have to reap the rewards. If he didn't strike while the iron was hot and completely routed them, the Tang dynasty would probably be greeted by hundreds of thousands of Arab soldiers in the coming year. Hiya! The long whips screeched through the air. The army quickly began to move into the distance. A few moments later, Wang Chong's army caught up to Shi Yuanqing, Lu Shi, and the others. The situation was somewhat different from Wang Chong's expectations. Although he had caught up to the army, he did not see Abu Muslim's group. What's going on? Where are Abu Muslim and the Arabs? Wang Chong said with a frown. Lord Marquis, there's a problem. While pursuing Abu Muslim, we were ambushed and attacked by Osman. Lu Shi gasped for breath. Osman? Wang Chong raised an eyebrow in surprise. If he remembered correctly, Osman had been heavily wounded at the very start, and had used some sort of Arab blood shield to escape. Of all the Arab generals, he had been the first to withdraw from the battle. Wang Chong had never expected him to appear at a time like this. We've never penetrated deep into Arab territory before, and we don't know if the Arabs have any other reinforcements lying in ambush along the way. After discussing things with Yuanqing, we decided to wait here for Milord to arrive, so that we can meet up with him. Lu Shi sternly said, his body bowed. The Tang dynasty's victory was already set in stone, so there was no need for a momentary advance to hand over the fruits of victory to the Arabs. That's fine. Although Abu Muslim and Ziyad have been greatly weakened, a centipede can still be killed. His intelligence and experience are not something you can compare to. Wait for me and Wang Chong to arrive, and then we can move. Gao Xinji said. Wang Chong nodded. He and Gao Xinji were in complete agreement on this point. Let's go. Abu Muslim won't be able to get very far, and he won't have much time to rest. Samarkand isn't far ahead, which is their closest base to Talas in the west. No matter what, we can't give them any time to catch their breath and recruit more soldiers. Chapter 1174. It is better to pursue a cornered enemy with the remaining courage than to seek fame as a tyrant. Abu Muslim and Ziyad had transferred all their energy to the dead Qutayba, and their strength was severely weakened, so they could only choose to flee. If we wait for them to recover, this battle won't be so easy. Let's go. Gao Xinji was even more straightforward than Wang Chong. With a single order, all his soldiers began to rush in the direction of Abu Muslim's retreat. Milord, the Black Forest is up ahead. After passing through the Black Forest, Samarkand is just a few hundred li away. After traveling for several dozen li, a voice suddenly sounded. Banahan was riding on a maroon horse, pointing to the front. Few of Wang Chong's subordinates had ever been to Arabia before, so they didn't know much about the route. But Banahan was different. As the leader of the Ferganan tribe of the western regions, Banahan had made several trips to Samarkand in his youth. Although it had been so long that he couldn't remember the exact route, he still remembered the general location. Cree! As they were speaking, a shrill cry came from the sky. The group of people raised their heads and saw a huge rock eagle spreading its wings in the sky, drawing strange patterns over and over again. After repeating this a few times, it quickly turned around and flew forward in a huge arc. Milord, there's a report from the front. There seems to be a battle taking place in the direction of the Black Forest. On the side, Zhang Ke looked away from the sky, rode his horse forward and bowed to Wang Chong. The rock eagles trained by Zhang Ke's eagle team all had their own special code words, with different flight paths representing different meanings. The rock eagle just now had said, there's a battle up ahead. But how is that possible? The Arab territory will soon be up ahead. Other than us, who else can fight with the Arabs? Shi Yuanqing was the first to speak, his eyes filled with shock. There was no need to doubt the strength of the Arabs west of the Tsong Mountains, and almost no faction could contend against them. All the factions that could pose a threat to them had been uprooted long ago. Who else could stop Abu Muslim? Even Gao Xinji had a pensive look on his face. Not necessarily. A light flashed in Wang Chong's eyes. He seemed to have thought of something, and suddenly said, Have you forgotten that there is another Khorasani? As soon as Wang Chong's voice fell, it was like a sudden clap of thunder. Everyone was startled at first, but they quickly revealed a look of understanding. Before this battle, the Khorasani had sent a message expressing their goodwill to the Tang dynasty. The Khorasani had sworn that as long as the Tang dynasty could defeat Abu Muslim and his enormous Arab army at Talas, they would send their strongest cavalry to work with the Tang dynasty to stop the Arabs on their retreat. A swearing cataphracts. In a flash, the same thought suddenly appeared in everyone's mind. Go! Gao Xinji squeezed the horse's abdomen and led the group forward. The 20,000 some great Tang soldiers followed closely behind him, filling the sky as they advanced toward the Black Forest. When the group arrived at the edge of the Black Forest, it only took a moment for a dozen heavily armored cavalrymen to form a neat formation and gallop towards the group. The physique, appearance, and armor of these people were similar to those of the Arabs, but they were also very different. It's the Khorasani, Shi Yuanqing and Lu Shi exclaimed in delight. The two of them had personally received the Khorasani when they were lingering at Talas, so they could tell at a glance that the Khorasani were very different from the fierce and warlike Arabs. Great General Wang Chong is up ahead. When the Khorasani was still several hundred paces from the group, a hawk-eyed and high-nosed Khorasani suddenly spoke in the language of the Tang dynasty. That's me. Wang Chong's eyes flashed as he waved a hand behind him. Someone, go to the back and invite Wen Shuyang and Sir Yuan over. One of Wang Chong's personal guards quickly left. A few moments later, Wen Shuyang rode up from the rear on a Turkic horse with a glossy white coat. Knowing that the situation was unique, Wen Shuyang and Wang Chong exchanged a few words before stepping forward to converse with the Khorasani cavalry. Although he seemed weak and cultured, when it came to language, Wen Shuyang immediately became high-spirited and brimming with confidence. It was like he had become a different person. Gallop! Gallop, gallop, gallop. In just a moment, Yuan Shusong spurred his horse back to the camp. "Milord, the Khorasani say that they learned of Milord's victory, and, in accordance with the oath they made to Milord, attacked the retreating Arab army in the Black Forest, and even captured Governor Osman of Cairo. The leader of the Khorasani, Great General Bahram, has sent word that he wishes for Milord to meet with him and discuss how to deal with the Arabs." Wen Shuyang excitedly said. "What?" The Khorasani soldiers were overjoyed. "Wonderful." Only Wang Chong and Gao Xinji glanced at each other in surprise. Although the Arabs' strength had been greatly reduced, their morale at rock bottom, they still had tens of thousands of soldiers, and they also had several top-class armies that possessed considerable strength. This sort of army was not something that any faction could defeat. The Khorasani had been able to defeat them, and even kill the heavily injured Osman. This sort of strength had left a deep impression on them. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. The Khorasani shouldn't be hostile. Wang Chong turned his head to Gao Xinji. Let's go and take a look. We've suffered great losses and don't have many soldiers left. If we can obtain the help of the Khorasani, we'll be of great help in suppressing the Arabs. Moreover, they're more familiar with the Arabian Empire than we are. With them as our guide, we'll be able to avoid a lot of trouble," Gao Xinji said after a few moments of thought. The appearance of the Khorasani at a time like this was truly unexpected, but it was definitely good news. Tinsum Khorasani led the way while Wang Chong and Gao Xinji brought up the rear. Around half a cup of tea later, Wang Chong's group arrived in the depths of the Black Forest, where the Khorasani army had already concluded its battle. In the Black Forest, in between the rubble and collapsed statues of gods, the corpses of Arabs were strewn all over the place. War horses were strewn across the ground in various postures, their blood freely staining this famous trade route of the Silk Road with blood. In the center of these corpses was an army of around 8,000 or 9,000 soldiers cleaning up the mess. The armor worn by this army was very uniform. The armor was extremely thick, and it gave off the smell of raging fire and fresh blood. Anyone who saw this army would be able to sense the steely and well-tempered aura exuding from them. This aura was extremely similar to that of the Wuxian cavalry of the Tang dynasty and the Mamelukes of the Arabs, but it was even thicker. This was the aura of an extremely ancient army, with an extremely long legacy. The Angolan cataphracts. This thought emerged in Wang Chong's mind. This was the origin of the Mamelukes, and the target of their emulation. The Angolan cataphracts were undoubtedly the strongest army in the region of 1,000 li to the west of the Tsong Mountains. This army had single-handedly forged the power and glory of the Sassanid dynasty. Even after the fall of the Sassanid dynasty, several decades later, this army still exuded an inspiring strength that had not been diminished by the passage of time. Upon seeing this army, Wang Chong finally understood why the Arabian Empire and the Mamelukes were so apprehensive of this remnant army of the Sassanid dynasty. As these thoughts flitted through his mind, Wang Chong quickly came back to his senses and fixed his gaze on the golden-armored figure at the front of the army, the Khorasani leader riding a monstrous warhorse and exuding a lofty and unfathomable aura. His expression was solemn and serene, his eyes as bright as the sun in the sky. The warhorse he was riding was also extremely intimidating, its muscles knotted and brimming with explosive power. It was at least 3 times the size of an ordinary warhorse. It was stopped in the middle of the road and was extremely eye-catching. Ase, Chisi Yilikalu. Before Wang Chong could speak, the golden-armored Khorasani leader immediately turned his head, his gaze sweeping past Gao Xianji and Wang Chong before settling on Wang Chong. "My lord, this should be Khorasani Great General Bahram." He's asking who Great General Wang Chong is. Wen Shuyang rode forward and whispered into Wang Chong's ear. As expected, Wang Chong nodded. As he looked at this Great General Bahram, Wang Chong more or less understood why Abu Muslim had been defeated by several thousand soldiers, and why Osman had been killed. In terms of strength, this Great General Bahram was at least on the same level as Abu Muslim at his peak. Even if he was lacking, it wouldn't be by much. Moreover, this Great General Bahram gave off an extremely valiant feeling. He was definitely a veteran of many battles, a top-class general who had experienced mountains of corpses and seas of blood. The Sassanid dynasty had been destroyed by the Arabs several decades ago, and the younger generation of generals simply couldn't possess this sort of aura. It was obvious that this Great General Bahram was a senior general of the Sassanid dynasty. Given his strength and the fact that Abu Muslim had been greatly weakened, he was naturally no match for him. "Sir Senior, come with me." Wang Chong called out to Gao Xianji and urged his horse forward. Great General pays his respects. Chapter 1175. Clang. There was a heaven-shaking clang, and before Wang Chong could react, the Khorasani leader had unsheathed his sword and raised it in the air. At the same time, he lowered his head, his expression solemn. Wang Chong and all the people behind him were dumbfounded by this sight. "My lord, he wishes to exchange swords with my lord. This is a custom of the Sassanid dynasty. An exchange of the most precious sword is a show of courtesy and respect to the most esteemed guest." The people of Khorasani cherished their swords, even more than their own lives, and they rarely use this sort of etiquette. They rarely use this custom, Wen Shuyang explained. The 56-year-old Wen Shuyang had begun to travel the world at the age of 17 or 18. At that time, the Sassanid dynasty had not yet been destroyed by the Arabs, and Wen Shuyang had traveled the world. He was well acquainted with many of the customs of the Sassanid dynasty, and he knew that this custom had an extraordinary significance to them. So that's how it is. Wang Chong also understood. After a moment of thought, he unsheathed his Wuxia steel sword and offered it with both hands. As all the Tang dynasty soldiers and Khorasani watched, the two exchanged swords. Bang! The moment the swords were exchanged, all the Angolan cataphracts and Sassanid cavalry behind Bahram began to cheer in excitement. Druya Shankuzi Masra. At this moment, Bahram spoke once more, his expression one of utmost respect. Great General Bahram says that the Arabs are the eternal foes of the Sassanids. My lord has killed their enemy Ibak, Qutayba, and more than 400,000 Arab soldiers. The Sassanids are eternally grateful to my lord. As long as my lord wishes to deal with the Arabs, the Sassanids are willing to serve my lord and become my lord's staunchest allies, to the west of the Tsong Mountains. Wen Shuyang translated. Great General is too polite. Wang Chong quickly replied. We've also heard about the plight of the Sassanids. The Arabs are vicious and cruel, delighting in conquest and destruction. In this matter, we share a common enemy. The Tang dynasty is also willing to become the staunchest ally of the Sassanids in dealing with the Arabs. Wang Chong said in a deep voice. General Wang's words are more than enough. Bahram's eyes brightened. As he spoke, he stretched out his thick and powerful right palm. Ehe! Wang Chong smiled and extended his right hand as well. Two steel-like hands clasped tightly in the void. At that moment, no one knew that this simple and forceful handshake had formed the firmest alliance on the continent west of the Tsong Mountains. It had also forged the Tang dynasty's strongest, most loyal, and most reliable ally in the region between Samarkand and Khorasan. Ha ha ha! As Wang Chong and Bahram released their hands, the entire Black Forest resounded with the cheerful laughter of the two armies. With the addition of Bahram and the 9,000 some Aswaran cataphracts, Wang Chong's forces had received a massive boost in strength. Bahram provided an important piece of information. The Khorasani had learned from the personal guards that Abu Muslim had left in Samarkand that Samarkand had begun to muster the militia. Once Abu Muslim arrived at Samarkand, they would close the city gates and use the thick walls of Samarkand to resist the Tang people. General has never been to Samarkand, so perhaps you do not know, but the walls of Samarkand are not much inferior to those of Talas. If they are allowed to retreat into the city and gather a large number of militia, it will be extremely disadvantageous to us. The urgent task at hand is to not give them any time to catch their breath. In addition, the people we left in Samarkand have successfully infiltrated Abu Muslim's army in the rear and taken control of one of the city gates. But Abu Muslim has always been cautious, and there is no guarantee that he will not begin to mobilize the defenses of Samarkand. Thus, we must be fast. Speed is of the essence in war. Bahram solemnly said. In addition, how long will General remain here in this battle with the Arabs? Bahram's eyes were suffused with deep concern. In order to cooperate with the Tang dynasty, the Sassanid elites had been mobilized, and even the Aswaran cataphracts that had been hidden this entire time had been called out by Bahram. This army was more than enough to deal with the remnants of Abu Muslim's defeated army, but once Abu Muslim caught his breath and gathered more Arab soldiers, the Sassanids would suffer grievous losses. The Aswaran cataphracts had been able to survive the encirclement of the Arabian Empire because they had always hidden themselves, never revealing a single trace of themselves. But once they were exposed, it would not be so easy to hide them again. Haha, great general, there is no need to worry. This war between the Tang dynasty and the Arabs is not just a single war, and our goal is not just Samarkand. In the fight against the Arabs, the Tang dynasty can be the Sassanid dynasty's firmest backer and ally. General has no need to worry about this. Wang Chong knew what Bahram and the Khorasani were worried about, and he immediately heartily laughed as he reassured them. The aggressive nature of the Arabs foreordained that they would forever be enemies of the great Tang. If they were not dealt a painful blow this time, they would definitely come back next year and besiege the walls of the great Tang. Just as the Stone of Destiny had said, one mountain could not accommodate two tigers, and one pool could not accommodate two dragons. It was very difficult for two equally massive empires to exist on the same continent. Just this point alone made it impossible for Wang Chong to easily withdraw his soldiers. Wonderful. Bahram's face was agitated. He had led his 8,000 to 9,000 Aswaran cataphracts on this journey, taking such a huge risk, precisely for this promise from Wang Chong. General, be at ease. From Samarkand to Khorasan, we know many rebels, all of them descendants of dynasties whose cities and countries were destroyed by the Arabs. I can contact them and organize them, so that they can work with General to sweep away the Arabs. The Arabs are perverse and cruel. They are everyone's enemies. General killed the Arab war god Qutayba at Talas. I am confident that everyone will support General as their leader in resisting the Arabs. At these words, Wang Chong and Gao Xianji glanced at each other, both of them greatly shocked. Although the Tang dynasty had defeated the Arabs in this campaign, it had also suffered grievous losses. Of its more than 100,000 soldiers, only 20 to 30,000 remained. This time, it had only had 8 to 9,000 Aswaran cataphracts as allies, a force that was still too weak to conquer the Arabs. But now, it seemed that the Tang dynasty would be able to obtain far more assistance than this. This was definitely a pleasant surprise. Great General, this is excellent. Let us proceed according to Great General's plan. Wang Chong turned his head and smiled at Bahram. The Tang dynasty soldiers were extremely exhausted from the battle, and the war with the Arabs was bound to be long and drawn out. Wang Chong ordered the army to rest for a while, replenish their strength and food, and then work with the Aswaran cataphracts to set out once more. Speed was paramount in war, and this time, the two armies made no more stops. They passed through the Black Forest and headed toward Samarkand. About 2 hours later, a huge city that towered into the clouds like a towering mountain came into view. What a massive city! Li Sai covered his brow with his hand as he stared at this majestic city, his eyes widening. The city of Talas was already massive, but this city was even larger and more majestic than the city of Talas. The thick and sturdy walls extended into the heavens. From a distance, one could tell that this city was even more difficult to breach than the city of Talas. Around Li Sai, Cheng Qianli, Shi Yuanqing, Lu Shi and Xue Qianjun all had similar looks in their eyes. It was clear that this fortress of the east had left an extremely deep impression on them. Begin! In the distance, Bahram, mounted on his monstrous warhorse, waved a signal banner at the high walls. In the next moment, with a rumble, a huge city gate that was 30 to 40 meters tall suddenly opened slowly, revealing a passageway that led to the military town of Samarkand. The opening of the gate made everyone feel like a heavy stone had been lifted from their hearts, and they instantly felt much more relaxed. Kail! Clang! With a clang, Wang Chong sat on the white-hoofed shadow's back and took out the sword he had exchanged with Bahram. The sharp tip of the sword was aimed at the heavens, its cold light reflecting off of it. Rumble! In the next moment, it was as if the mountains were collapsing and the earth was cracking. The two armies and nearly 30,000 elites surged forward like a mighty tide, charging towards Samarkand. Ziad, listen to my order. Reinforce the defenses and change all the defenses. Increase the number of soldiers stationed at each gate, and increase the number of soldiers stationed at each gate by 4 to 5 times. Samarkand's walls are high and thick. This will be our most important tool against the Tang people. As long as we have this city, the Tang people will find it very difficult to break through, not even in a year. Within Samarkand, Abu Muslim was pacing back and forth in the domed hall, his expression tense and his eyes brimming with unconcealable worry. If one looked carefully, one would even notice that his eyes were bloodshot. In the Battle of Talas, the Arabs had suffered an unprecedented defeat. Ibak had been killed, the Mamelukes had been heavily wounded, and Osman had been ambushed and killed by Bahram. Most importantly, even the governor of war of the north, Qutayba, had died at the hands of the Tang people, as well as more than 400,000 Arab elites. Just the thought of such a miserable defeat would make any Arab governor's scalp go numb. Even now, Abu Muslim didn't know how he should explain this to the caliph, nor how he should face the furious caliph. Yes, this general will do so. Chapter 1176. This time, the tens of thousands of Arab soldiers were truly panicking like stray dogs. They had traveled from Talas to Samarkand, and the number of soldiers gathered around Abu Muslim and Ziad had long since dwindled to less than 30,000. Fortunately, they had Samarkand. When he thought about how sturdy Samarkand was, Ziad immediately calmed down. At the very least, the two of them could use this city to catch their breath. Reporting. Ziad had barely taken 2 steps out of the hall when he heard a frantic voice. The two of them tensed up and turned their heads to see an Arab messenger rushing in. his face pale and panting for breath. Reporting. The second gate of Samarkand has been broken. The Sassanids have led more than 20,000 Tang people into the city. The moment the messenger entered the hall, he immediately kneeled down, his body drenched in sweat, as if on the verge of collapse. What? Abu Muslim and Ziyad shuddered at these words, as if they had seen a ghost. How could this be? Where are the scouts? Why didn't we receive any news of such a major event? How could we not have seen such a massive army approach? Ziyad's eyes were round, not even daring to believe it. An army of more than 10,000 was such a massive target that only a blind person could have missed it. But they hadn't even received any news of the enemy's approach. My lord, the scouts have already sent out the news, but before they could even approach the hall, they were assassinated by the Sassanid experts hiding in the city. Right now, the Sassanid spies in the city are committing arson, assassinations, and uprisings. Samarkand is in chaos. My lord, we should quickly withdraw. The messenger's face was fraught with worry. Although the messenger's last words were only a few words, they were like a thunderclap in the ears of Abu Muslim and Ziyad, causing their minds to tremble and their faces to pale. The words, "My lord, let's evacuate quickly," were even more shocking than when Wang Chong and the Sassanids joined hands to attack the city. The army had been defeated, and if Abu Muslim and Ziyad recovered their strength, they would still be able to fight to the death, but the morale of the army had been shattered. Even if Abu Muslim and Ziyad recovered their strength, they would be powerless to reverse the situation. Qutaybah's death in front of tens of thousands of soldiers had dealt a massive blow to the army. The army no longer dared to fight with the Tang army. As these thoughts flew through his mind, Abu Muslim raised his head to the sky and gave a long sigh. This time, they might not have any hope of turning the tables. Pass down my order. All troops retreat. Leave Samarkand to the Tang people. Abu Muslim's voice was tinged with unwillingness, but there was nothing he could do to reverse the situation. Ziyad stood to the side, a complicated expression on his face. Yes, sir. Finally, Ziyad stepped out of the hall. A few moments later, the signal flag was waved, and all the Arab soldiers in the city were swept away from Samarkand toward the distant Khorasan. What? Abu Muslim and Ziyad fled so quickly? In Samarkand, Wang Chong couldn't help but sneer when he heard the news. I originally thought that there would be a major battle, but it seems like there's no need for that. Suki, write 2 letters in my name. One is to Feng Chongqing, who has been left behind in Anxi, and have him send an army to Samarkand. The other is to the imperial court. Now that the war is over, the imperial court will need to send someone to take over the aftermath. Talas had been destroyed, so the Tang dynasty's best bridgehead against the Arabs was Samarkand. Once the strategic fortress was occupied, even a small number of soldiers would be enough to contend against the Arabs. Lord Wang Chong, the road west from Samarkand is practically flat. There aren't many fortified cities that we can rely on. Abu Muslim doesn't have a strong enough defense, so he'll definitely flee to Khorasan. This is the best chance for us to launch an attack and encircle the Arabs. Bahram sternly said, Just as my lord suggests, let the entire army move out and continue the pursuit. Wang Chong nodded. With the Sassanid acting as a guide and spy, Wang Chong's forces were like fish in water in the pursuit. They didn't encounter much pressure. A few moments later, the drums began to beat. After leaving behind several thousand soldiers to defend Samarkand with the Khorasani, the 2 armies set off in pursuit of Abu Muslim. As the news of Qutaybah's death at Talas spread, from Khorasan in the east to Samarkand in the west, the entire eastern region of Arabia was shaken, and the people of the countries that Arabia had once conquered cheered. And with Bahram's prestige and his ability to mediate, more and more rebel soldiers joined the great Tang army like a rolling snowball. When they had first set out from Samarkand, Wang Chong's army, including the Sassanids, had only been 30 to 40,000 soldiers. But on the road, he had quickly gathered an additional 100,000 soldiers, and this army was still growing at an astonishing rate. In the end, Wang Chong had gathered 30 to 40 different factions, an army of more than 200,000, and his momentum was incredible. Abu Muslim had originally been able to put up a fight against Wang Chong, but later on, when Wang Chong had gathered more than 200,000 soldiers, he no longer had this chance. The Arabs had been unscrupulous in their extortion and slaughter, causing the people of the eastern region to seethe with resentment. While the Arabs had a powerful army and could suppress the situation, a new challenger appeared, especially after the Arabs suffered a crushing defeat at Talas. This immediately caused the people to be filled with resentment, and this was the greatest aid to Wang Chong's western expedition. While Wang Chong was pursuing Abu Muslim's defeated army, elsewhere, as the news of the Great Tang's victory at Talas spread, all the empires and civilizations of the continent began to tremble, and the power structure began to quietly shift. Flap flap. A messenger bird flew from the distant Samarkand to the distant Anchi Protectorate headquarters. As the news of the victory at Talas spread, the countless empires and factions of the western regions, who had been watching this epic battle, were left slack-jawed. 100,000 against 500,000. Such a massive difference in soldiers, but the Tang dynasty still won. Unbelievable. In the distant palace of the Empress Kingdom of Beilu, a stalwart figure with a long beard suddenly stood up, his large eyes brimming with shock. The war between Arabia and the Tang dynasty had swept through the kingdoms of the western regions like a storm. Countless countries were swaying like grass on the wall, struggling to decide whether to submit to the Tang dynasty or to Arabia. All the countries were speculating on who would be the final victor, and the Empress Kingdom of Beilu was clearly leaning toward Arabia. No matter what, an army of 500,000 elites, with powerful individuals like Qutayba, Abu Muslim, and Osman presiding over it, should have been impossible for them to lose. But reality had given the entire Empress Kingdom of Beilu, including its king and ministers, a vicious slap to the face. Pass on my order. Prepare 10,000 taels of gold, 10 bushels of treasure, 100 beauties and 10,000 cows and sheep. Have them immediately delivered to the Anchi Protectorate headquarters to celebrate the Tang dynasty's victory. The king of the Empress Kingdom of Beilu sat in the hall and roared like a lion. A little guard who was passing on the order was kicked out of the hall by him because his footsteps were too slow. But unlike the Empress Kingdom of Beilu, Greater and Lesser Balar were rejoicing and excited. Ha ha ha, I knew it would be like this. The Tang dynasty really did win. When the two kings of Greater and Lesser Balar received the news, they gathered together to celebrate this great news. At an exorbitant price, Greater and Lesser Balar had loaned out 8,000 of their best pikemen. Although these pikemen had all died in the battle, the Tang dynasty had won, and Greater and Lesser Balar had received an enormous return on their investment. With this victory, Greater and Lesser Balar had made the Tang dynasty owe them an enormous favor. In the western regions, Greater and Lesser Balar would be able to rely on a great tree to enjoy the shade, no longer having to worry about Uzun's oppression or invasion. As for the 8,000 pikemen who had died in battle, although the loss was truly heart-wrenching, Greater and Lesser Balar had mastered the training methods for pikemen, so it was only a matter of time before they could train another batch. And Greater and Lesser Balar were not the only ones celebrating this victory. Besides those kingdoms that had supported the Tang dynasty, there were also countless mercenary tribes that had participated in the battle. Haha, victory! The Tang dynasty has won, and so has their leader. The Arabs have kicked a metal plate this time. All the tribes that had been hired by the Tang dynasty to participate in the Battle of Talas, from south to north, east to west, were cheering. Victory and defeat were commonplace for soldiers. Almost all the mercenaries that had participated in the Battle of Talas had been killed, but to the tribes and shepherds in the rear, this was not important. They only cared about one thing: whether or not the valiant warriors of these tribes had stood on the side of the victor in battle. Although many warriors had died in battle, this also meant that a large amount of compensation money would pour in after the battle. And this money, together with the support and affirmation of the Tang dynasty, would be an opportunity for the tribes to develop and strengthen in the future. For the tribe, everyone could be sacrificed, and dying in battle was the best ending for a warrior. This was a principle that all the shepherds believed in. Damn it! This is a big problem. Chapter 1177. These Arabs are truly too useless. If they had known that they would lose to the Tang dynasty, they wouldn't have offended the Tang dynasty for some petty profit. When Qixi Protector General Wang Chong had begun to recruit soldiers in the western regions, not all the tribes had responded enthusiastically. There was no lack of tribes like the Arjun tribe, which had accepted the Arabs' bribes and found all sorts of excuses to avoid employment, while secretly stirring up trouble in the western regions. It would have been fine if the Tang dynasty had been defeated, as the Arjun tribe would have been able to obtain a large amount of war contribution money from the Arabs. But now that the Arabs had been defeated and the dust had settled, the Arjun tribe needed to prepare to face the Tang dynasty's wrath and settle the score afterwards. Chief, what do we do now? I heard that the new leader of the Tang dynasty is not to be trifled with. A core member of the Arjun tribe had long ago turned pale and was sweating profusely. Qixi Protector General Wang Chong had only appeared in the western regions for a very short period of time, but his reputation had long ago reached the ears of the entire region. For the sake of the Gonka tribe, this Tang dynasty commander had exterminated the Saka tribe on the grounds of treachery, and in the war with the Arabs, he had killed another 400,000 Arabs. This was a truly callous and bloodthirsty Azura great general. No one dared to imagine what sort of fate awaited these tribes once he returned and settled the score. There's nothing else we can do. Bring me a brush and paper. Go to the Anqi Protectorate headquarters, and bring gold and silver to beg for forgiveness from Anqi's garrison commander Feng Changqing. Say that we were forced by the Arabs, and had no other choice. We had no intention of opposing the Tang dynasty. As the one-eyed Argent leader spoke, he suddenly gritted his teeth and increased the stakes. In addition, send me 100,000 cows and sheep, 100 beauties of the western regions, and 10 beauties from the Arabs. If Feng Changqing doesn't agree, we can only flee to the far north, to those desolate and uninhabited lands of ice and cold. I hear that there are some barbarians there. When the time comes, we might have to fight with them. Yes. That similar events were occurring throughout the western regions, and the great victory at Talas intimidated all the tribes. Unlike in the past, the Tang dynasty had defeated the Arabian Empire west of the Tsong Mountains, a power that everyone acknowledged to be the strongest, proving that it was the number one power on the continent. Now, all the countries were filled with deep reverence for the strongest empire on the continent. At this moment, the most excited person was none other than Feng Changqing, who was guarding Suaya City and guarding the rear. Ha ha ha, they won! The Tang dynasty won! My lord, General Wang, I knew you would return in triumph. Feng Changqing sat on the spacious throne in the main hall, holding the letter that Wang Chong and Gao Xianji had sent from Samarkand. He was beaming with joy. He held that thin piece of paper in his hand, and never got tired of looking at it. Reporting. While Feng Changqing was flipping through the letter again and again, a voice came from outside. In the blink of an eye, a messenger from the Anqi Protectorate strode in. My lord, the Jursak tribe of the western regions has sent a congratulatory letter, congratulating the Tang dynasty on their great victory at Talas. In addition, they have sent 10,000 taels of gold, 10,000 cows and sheep, 100 beauties and all kinds of pearls and agate. In addition, the Naiman tribe has sent 10,000 taels of gold and 100,000 cows and sheep. The Chidi tribe has sent 10,000 bushels of agate, countless jadeite, and 5,000 jade pendants carved from suet white jade. The Baltali tribe has sent 20 supreme luminous night pearls, 10,000 war horses, and 20,000 taels of gold to congratulate the Tang dynasty on their victory. The Chechikian kingdom of the western regions has sent 50,000 taels of gold, 20,000 bolts of silk, and 5,000 pairs of jadeite. The Shikimi kingdom of the western regions has sent 30,000 taels of gold, 300 beauties. The messenger knelt on one knee on the ground and read a long list of names in his hand. Feng Changqing sat at the head of the hall, a smile on his face so wide that it seemed as if he could barely close his mouth. Many of these tribes were allies of the Great Tang, but the majority of those that had sent gold and beauties were wavering on the right and left side of the conflict, some of them even working together with the Arabs in an ambiguous relationship. But Feng Changqing did not care. The war was over, and what he needed to do was win the most for the Tang dynasty. 10,000 taels of gold, 10,000 cows and sheep, 100 beauties. You think you can escape this calamity with just this? Impossible. If I don't make you bleed a little more this time, you'll never be able to remember this lesson. Feng Changqing narrowed his eyes, his right index finger lightly tapping on the metal armrest of his throne. In a flash, he had come up with a plan. Pass on my order. Recruit more soldiers and gather mercenaries. 10 days from now, they will follow me to Samarkand. I'd like to see which countries and tribes will dare to refuse. In addition, send a letter to Lady Su Yichin in the rear. If we want to advance west and occupy Samarkand and the other Arab territories, we will need her help. Feng Changqing sternly said. Yes. Just a few days later, Wang Chang's second messenger pigeon flew along the Silk Road and into the capital of the Tang dynasty. Boom! When the news of the great victory at Talas reached the imperial court, the entire court rejoiced. Even though there had been many disagreements between the civil and military officials, the news of the Tang dynasty's victory over the western barbarians to the west of the Tsong Mountains had stirred everyone's spirits. Ha ha, victory! As expected, we won again. This king knew that you wouldn't disappoint me. As long as you are here, the Tang dynasty will have nothing to worry about on the border. When the king of Song heard this news, he was in high spirits and elated. Only the heavens knew how much pressure he had endured in this campaign to reinforce Talas. But now that the clouds had dispersed and the rain had cleared, everything was over. Most importantly, Wang Chong had used an unprecedented victory to give everyone a satisfactory answer, once more proving that he had a discerning eye for talent and had not judged wrongly. Bastard, so many imperial great generals couldn't kill him. Has this brat gained some kind of spirit? King Qi had just walked out of the imperial palace when he couldn't help but slam his fist into the carriage, pulverizing it to pieces. King Qi was not that interested in military affairs. He only cared about authority, but as long as the Wang clan, as long as the king of Song, and especially that brat were present, he would never be able to get what he wanted. King Qi had launched several attacks against the Wang clan and the king of Song, but every one of them had been foiled by that 17-year-old boy. Although Wang Chong was young, he had long ago become a thorn in King Qi's side. In the War of the Southwest, Wang Chong had obtained the favor of the Holy Emperor and been promoted to nobility, becoming the first young marquis in the history of the Central Plains. Finally, at the age of 17, he had become Qixi Protector General. In addition, with this great victory, if this continued, he would be promoted to the rank of nobility, even becoming a king or marquis. This made King Qi feel an enormous threat. To the southeast of the imperial palace, in the renowned Four Quarters Embassy, a carriage had long since stopped. The carriage door opened, and Wang Chong's big uncle Wang Zhen tidied his clothes and walked out. The current Wang Zhen had a bright gleam in his eyes, and his face was flushed as if he was drunk. Furthermore, the unconcealable smile at the corner of his eyes revealed his current mood. His nephew had fought a battle of 100,000 against 500,000, defeating the combined army of Arabia, Uzan, and the Western Turks. The Wang clan had truly become famous throughout the world and received the respect of all. As his big uncle, Wang Zhen could not help but feel honored. Let's go. Take me to see the old master. I want to personally tell him this news, Wang Zhen loudly said. Passing through the main gate and through the bamboo forest, Wang Zhen headed for the main hall of the Western Quarters. Before Wang Zhen had even entered, he could already hear the sounds of laughter, the old master's loud laughter particularly striking. Jenner, you've come at just the right time. That child Chong'er won a major victory at Talas, truly living up to the expectations of the Tang dynasty and His Majesty. Come, let's drink a cup together. An elderly and deep voice came from the main hall. Duke Jiao, dressed in casual clothes, was seated at the head of the hall. The moment Wang Jin crossed the threshold, Duke Jiao waved at him. Jenner, it's rare for your father to be in such a mood. Today, you should accompany him for a good drink. The silver-haired old madam called out to Duke Jiao, her face amiable. Duke Jiao's health had never been very good, so the old madam had always strictly forbidden him from drinking alcohol. But this time, she had not only made an exception and allowed him to drink, she had even invited her eldest son, Wang Zhen, to accompany him. Wang Zhen had been confused at the start, not understanding how the old master had learned of the news so quickly. But when the figure at the old master's side turned his head, Wang Zhen instantly understood. Elder Yi, Wang Zhen blurted out. No wonder. With Elder Yi here, it was no wonder the old master had learned of the news so quickly. This child will go. Wang Zhen faintly smiled, raised his robe, and quickly sat down at the table covered with side dishes. Taking a small porcelain cup from the table, he clinked it against the wine cups of the two elders. For Chong'er, for the Tang dynasty. Bang! At the same time, at the back door of the Su mansion, the oldest and most respected mansion in the capital, a tightly shut door suddenly opened. An 8 or 9-year-old child, holding a letter in his hand, yelled as he dashed in. Ha ha ha, master, victory at Talas. Senior brother has won. Senior brother has won. Xiao Jianjian was so excited that his face was red. He didn't even notice that he had lost one of his shoes. His eyes flashed as he ran toward the ancient-styled, yet somewhat shabby residence in the center of the Su residence. Halt! When he was 10 some steps from the residence, an elderly and dignified shout came from within, a thunderous roar. Upon hearing this voice, Xiao Jianjian's body trembled and he stopped. Didn't I tell you already? As a general, even if Mount Tai collapses in front of you, you won't lose your composure. It's just a minor border war. Look at how impatient you are. The elderly voice was extremely stern. Chapter 1178. But that was not a normal battle. That was senior brother's battle. 100,000 against 500,000. That was a huge victory for the few. Xiao Jianjian lowered his head and curled his lips. His fingers twirled as he stared at his feet. His face was filled with dissatisfaction. How dare you talk back? So Yongsun bellowed. That's right. Xiao Jianjian was unconvinced. His voice was as soft as a mosquito's, almost inaudible. Xiao Jianjian, that's enough. Don't talk back to your master. Your master already knows about your senior brother's situation. You'd better leave now. Just then, another voice rang out from within the house. It sounded completely different from So Yongsun's. It was not as powerful and authoritative. Got it, Uncle Fong? Xiao Jianjian stuck out his tongue and made a face before running away. Little Jianjian didn't know that in the house with the door tightly shut, 2 old eyes were staring at his back for a long time before looking away. Fong Hong, you're spoiling him too much. It's just a battle. He's too impatient. How can he lead the army, devise strategies, and conquer the world? Seated on a wooden armchair, Su Zhengchen glanced at the old servant beside him and said with a deep voice, the art of war involved the lives of tens of thousands of soldiers, as well as the lives of the commoners. As the saying went, one couldn't afford to neglect important matters of the empire. Thus, Su Zhengchen had always been strict with his military, and it was the same for little Jianjian. Hee old master, why are you so strict with him? He's just a child. Besides, isn't old master's legacy inherited by that child, Wang Chong? The old servant Fong Hong said with a smile. You. For a moment, Su Zhengchen was at a loss for words. The old servant smiled but did not speak. He had served old master for most of his life, and knew what old master was thinking. So Yongsun did not admit it, but deep down, he had already treated Wang Chong as his disciple. Otherwise, he wouldn't have put in so much effort to teach him the art of god and demon obliteration, and help him train 4,000 soldiers of the Azure Martial Army. It was just that Su Zhengchen had never admitted to it. This child will be spoiled by you sooner or later. I don't know what to do with you. Su Zhengchen glared at this old servant, who had served him for 50 to 60 years. Then he turned around, picked up the wine cup on the table, and drained it in a single gulp. The old servant didn't say a word, but the smile on his lips grew wider and wider. He picked up the white porcelain wine gourd on the table, and filled Su Zhengchen's cup once more. His old master usually drank no more than 4 cups of wine, but this was already the 8th time he had filled Wang Chang's cup, a fact that not even he had noticed. Although he had been playing down the matter and using it as an ordinary battle, Fang Hong knew that his old master was actually more delighted than anyone else. As the wine pot on the table slowly emptied, the old servant quietly replaced it with another pot of wine and continued to fill So Young-sun's cup. In all his time with his old master, Fang Hong had never seen his old master so happy. And after meeting that child called Chong-er, the smile on his old master's face grew wider and wider, comforting Fang Hong. And as the news of Talis spread, the influence of this matter in the capital continued to grow. Swish, swish. As imperial proclamations were pasted on the various gates of the Tang dynasty's capital, and more details were revealed, the capital began to seethe. Ha ha ha, what did I say? The young Marquis is the reincarnation of the heavenly fate star. He came to assist His Majesty in sweeping away the barbarians and continuing the golden age of our Tang dynasty. 100,000 against 500,000. This young Marquis is the true war god of the new generation. Only the Crown Prince's junior guardian Wang Zhongxi and the war god of the older generation, So Young-sun, can compare to him. Ha ha ha. As expected of the descendant of Duke Jiao, the Wang clan has 3 generals, a true sect of martyrs, a truly loyal subject of the Tang dynasty. We should ask the Holy Emperor and the imperial court to grant the Wang clan a title. That's right. Let's go together and ask the Holy Emperor to grant the Wang clan a title. The various parts of the city gate were bustling with activity. Countless merchants, wealthy clans, and even some of the nobles of the capital had gathered. Not only that, all the restaurants, taverns, tea-houses, and inns of the capital were discussing the gruesome battle that had taken place at Talis. The people loudly discussed the matter, all of them extremely proud. The matter of granting the Wang clan a title was initially only discussed by the common people, but later on, even the officials of the court agreed and began to submit memorials. In the end, it became a massive voice that could not be ignored. In the end, all the memorials were gathered in the depths of the imperial palace, in the hands of the Holy Emperor. The imperial palace towered over the imperial palace, and in its deepest depths was a golden hall, dignified and solemn. It stood at the highest point of the imperial palace like a giant bird with its wings spread wide, looking down on the capital. The Taiji Palace was the residence of the Holy Emperor of the Tang dynasty. No matter how fierce the storms and storms of the outside world raged, this place was always calm, as if no storm could reach this place. Your Majesty, after the great victory at Talis, that child Wang Chong truly did not fail to live up to Your Majesty's high hopes. They have already crossed the Black Forest, occupied Samarkand, and are now heading west toward the end of the Silk Road, Khorasan. To the west of the Tsong Mountains, the barbarian lands have already become the territory of my Tang dynasty, and Your Majesty's territory has greatly increased. This is an unprecedentedly grand occasion. The voices in the imperial court that wish to grant the Wang clan a title are getting louder and louder. This old servant has already collected several hundred letters. Outside the hall, Eunuch Gao had his hands tucked into his sleeves and was smiling like a Maitreya Buddha. Your Majesty, granting a title is no small matter. Starting with His Majesty Gaozong, the imperial court has not granted a title to any great clan for several decades. Moreover, once a title is given, it will be equivalent to having the Iron Scroll of the Alchemy Edict, a golden medallion of immunity. This might cause a new upheaval in the imperial court. The imperial court rarely granted titles or commendations to any particular clan. And this was not just out of caution. Based on the experience of the previous dynasties, all those great clans that were granted titles ended up becoming arrogant because they were favored, ultimately becoming a scourge for the imperial court. Even if this did not appear at the time, their descendants had basically confirmed this. The common people did not know this, but the imperial court, which had inherited the records of the previous dynasties, was well aware of this matter. And that was not all. Because the successive dynasties rarely granted titles, the granting of titles itself had a very deep meaning. In the minds of the officials, it represented the emperor's special favor. As a result, in a short period of time, an enormous faction quickly formed around these noble clans, intensifying the factional strife in the imperial court and destroying the original balance. This was the reason why the imperial court was so cautious when it came to conferring titles. This did not mean that titles could not be granted. Only clans that were extremely loyal to the imperial court and could be completely trusted could receive such an honor. The hall was quiet, as if it was in another time and space. No one knew what the Holy Emperor was thinking at this moment. "Your Majesty, why don't you allow this old servant to refuse?" Gao Lishur said after a moment of silence. Although public opinion was at its peak, and the voices for petitions were at their strongest, with even the civil and military officials of the imperial court participating, it was not too difficult for the imperial court to refuse. There were thousands of reasons to refuse. This was how politics worked. "There's no need." A moment later, a dignified voice rang out from the most authoritative hall in the world. "Pass on my decree. The petition is approved." Hearing these words, Gao Lishur's entire body shook. He seemed to understand something in an instant, and lowered his head. This old servant will obey. In the generation of the Holy Emperor, this was definitely the first noble clan to be granted a title. Even old Master Yao, who was so favored by the Holy Emperor and had such great influence in the imperial court, had not received such an honor. The granting of titles to the Wang family would probably shock the entire imperial court for a very long time, and affect the structure of the entire Tang dynasty in the future. Rumble. When the Holy Emperor ordered the 6 departments to discuss granting titles to the Wang family, this matter immediately caused a huge uproar in the entire Tang dynasty. Favor? What kind of favor is this? The people were in an uproar, especially those who hoped to grant the Wang family a title. But the reaction in the imperial court was completely different. "I didn't expect the Holy Emperor's favor for Wang Chong and the Wang family to reach this level." In the imperial court, an old imperial censor received the news. His eyes widened in shock, his face full of disbelief. In the depths of the imperial palace, in the Yuzhen palace. "Ha ha, little sister, do you see this? What do you think of this sworn brother of yours? What kind of glory is this family of valiant martyrs? Although you and I are like rootless duckweed in this palace, as long as we have the support of my sworn brother and the Wang family, our position in the imperial court will be as stable as a boulder. We might even be on equal footing with King Qi and the King of Song, becoming the 3rd power in the Tang dynasty." Yang Zhao, dressed in white scholarly robes and a black bedding, walked in from outside, his sleeves fluttering in the wind. Although he did his best to imitate the manner of those scholars, in the end, he was still lacking. After just a few steps, he returned to his original self. With his head held high and his face beaming with joy, he walked toward the hall and hurried over to Consort Tai Jun in the jade tent. "Big brother, this time, you've really done something that's most beneficial to us." The jade tent fluttered, and a jade white foot stretched out. Consort Tai Jun supported a pretty maid at her side as she stood up and slowly walked out of the tent. At this moment, Consort Tai Jun's face was also brimming with joy. Her older brother was a lazy glutton and addicted to gambling. In the few months he had been in the capital, he had not only lost all his traveling expenses, but also spent every day in the gambling houses, begging on the streets for money. He was truly a disappointment to the extreme. But everyone had their own shortcomings and strengths. After being in the capital for so long, he had still done a great deed. Just as he had said, Wang Chong had written her 2 poems on the tune of purity and peace, and consort Tai Jun had thus let off the king of song. Moreover, Yang Zhao and Wang Chong were sworn brothers, so they had a close relationship. In the eyes of outsiders, they were on the same side. With the support of Wang Chong and the Wang family, she would no longer be completely helpless in the palace and in the court. Someone take me to His Majesty. This time, I will personally leave the palace to pay a visit to the Wang clan and see this Madame Zhao. Chapter 1179. While the entire Tang dynasty was rejoicing over their victory at Talas, in the distant northeast corner of the Uzun Plateau, a lonely whistle echoed through the air. On this rugged road leading to Yusang, a defeated army of several thousand was slowly making its way down the winding road, its helmets and armor stripped off, its morale low. And in the middle of this army, there was a white yak war flag that was extremely eye-catching. This was the remnant army that Huoba Sengji had led to retreat from Talas. Huoba Sengji's army had spent more than twice as much time retreating from the stone bridge. The war at Talas had ended, and the news had spread throughout the western regions and the surrounding countries. All the countries large and small along the way had tightly shut their gates, clearly showing hostility to this defeated army. In the past, when the army had just set off and was at its peak, Huoba Sengji would have long ago led his army to attack and exterminate these small countries if they dared to treat the Uzun in such a manner. But this army, with its great general and wise minister dead, only had a few thousand soldiers left, unable to pose any threat to these countries on the way back. There were many times when Huoba Sengji had been forced to lead his army far away to avoid conflict with these factions. This was an unprecedented humiliation. But Huoba Sengji no longer cared about this. Prime Minister General, it won't be long before you can return to Uzun. As the Uzun Plateau approached, Huoba Sengji turned his head to look at the corpses of Dalwan Ruozan, Huashu Wuzong, and Dusong Mengpoj on the warhorses at his side, a desolate expression on his face. Those cheerful and heroic words they had said when they left still rang in his ears. The grandiose and invincible army of 100,000 seemed like it had only been yesterday. But in the blink of an eye, all this had vanished like smoke, leaving him alone with his several thousand defeated soldiers. Huoba Sengji could not help but reveal a sorrowful expression when he thought of that. However, he quickly calmed himself down. He no longer cared about anything else. There was only one thought left in his mind, and that was to bring the corpses of the great minister and the others back to the plateau no matter what. General, look up ahead. As he was immersed in his sorrow, he heard a cry of alarm as an Uzun soldier pointed forward. Huoba Sang was startled, and he subconsciously raised his head. At the start, he had been dumbfounded, but he quickly saw a dense army resting on the distant Tibetan plateau. From a distance it looked like an ant. Translated by Hypersheep 325, it's the Western Turks. Huoba Sengji's eyes widened as if he had been provoked, and he raised his head, his mind much clearer than before. Almost at the same time, the army resting on the plateau also noticed the new army. Under the green flag of the Golden Wolf, a tall and burly figure rode on a warhorse and galloped forward a few steps before stopping. "My lord, it's the Uzun. They've also retreated." A voice suddenly rang in his ear. Chekan Bemba urged his horse's abdomen to catch up from behind, looking at the direction of Huoba Sengji below the plateau. Dewusseli's face was pale, and his aura extremely weak. His gaze swept through the air and met Huoba Sengji's gaze. At this moment, Huoba Sengji's eyes were brimming with rage, but Dewusseli couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. At the most crucial moment of the Battle of Talas, Dewusseli had been frightened away by Wang Chong's palm, completely abandoning his allies. For someone of Dewusseli's status, as the Celestial Wolf Great General, to say such a thing was an extremely humiliating matter. How could Dewusseli not feel embarrassed now that he had run into Huoba Senji's group of Uzun soldiers. But a moment later, Wuxia turned his head and looked past Huoba Senji, quickly landing on the corpses of Daluan Ruozhen, Huoshu Wuzong, and Dusong Mangpoch. Wuxia had a complicated expression on his face, a hint of sorrow in his eyes. Although he had not been in an alliance with the Uzun for very long, and had often schemed against each other, the fox mourned the death of the rabbit. Daluan Ruozhen, Huoshu Wuzong, and Dusong Mangpoch had been killed by Wang Chong and the Tang people, and Wuxia and his Western Turkic army had suffered the same fate. How could Wuxia not be moved by this? Great General, should we go and meet with them before we leave? Che Bemba said. There's no need. Wuxia shook his head and quickly returned to normal. The Battle of Talas is over, and our alliance with the Uzun is no more. In the future, we will have to fight our own battles and face the even stronger Tang dynasty and the retaliation that can come at any time. There is no need for us to meet again. A similar conversation was taking place with the remnants of Uzun's army on the plateau. Without any pause, Wuxia turned his horse around and led the remnants of his army into the distance. At almost the same time, Huoba Senji set off with his army. Although they were also heading toward the plateau, they were going in a completely different direction. The two armies acted like they had never known each other before, forgetting each other. At the same time, in Khorasan, tens of thousands of li from the capital, the northern winds were blowing. At this moment, this western terminus of the Silk Road was covered in withered grass and frost, and the temperature was as cold as ice. And in the withered grass outside Khorasan, tens of thousands of warhorses stood in a vast sea. In the middle of the army, a huge five-clawed dragon banner fluttered in the wind, and around this dragon banner of the Great Tang were countless other banners, each one pointing to the clouds. The 20,000-some soldiers of the Tang dynasty, and the 180,000 rebel soldiers of the various dynasties, for a total of 200,000, were lined up in front of the gates of Khorasan, the air somber and somber. General, it's about time. Everything is ready. Great General Bahram rode up on his monstrous warhorse and whispered into Wang Chong's ear. Wang Chong nodded, and then he turned to the imposing and impregnable walls of Khorasan. The black Arab war banners covered the walls, and countless Arab soldiers had gathered above the walls. In the center of these Arab soldiers stood Abu Muslim and Ziyad, side by side. The two of them had unleashed a storm of energy that seemed to pierce through the heavens as they confronted the 200,000 soldiers of the alliance. Abu Muslim, Ziyad, have the two of you made your decision? Wang Chong's voice resounded over the entire army. From Samarkand to this place, even though Wang Chong and his army had pursued day and night, not giving Abu Muslim any time to catch his breath, they had still been one step behind. Abu Muslim had fled all the way to Khorasan, and after 7 or 8 days, he had finally recovered his strength. Moreover, he had used his title as the governor of Iron and Blood in the Eastern War Zone to gather a large number of militias. He was now using the thick walls of Khorasan to contend against the Tang dynasty. But no matter how stubbornly Abu Muslim resisted, it was all too late. With the elite soldiers of the Tang dynasty serving as the core, and the 180,000 soldiers he had recruited, no matter how unwilling Abu Muslim was, he was powerless to reverse the situation. Wang Chong's momentum had been established, and there was no one in the Eastern Arabian front that could contend against him. Wang Chong, there's no point in talking. Arabia has no surrendering generals, no army that will surrender without a fight. Bring it on. Abu Muslim stood like a mountain on the walls, a firm expression on his face. Wang Chong, don't get carried away by your wishful thinking. We've already replaced all the guards at the gates of Khorasan. What happened at Samarkand will not happen again. So what if you have 200,000 soldiers? Khorasan is impregnable and can never be broken. At the same time, Ziyad spoke up from atop the walls. Khorasan had once been the royal capital of the Sassanid dynasty. Back then, hundreds of thousands of Arab soldiers had been bombarding the capital for several years, but they had not been able to break through precisely because of these sturdy walls. Eventually, the 3 Arab governors had joined together and dispatched the behemoth army. Only by relying on the massive size and destructive power of these behemoths had they managed to break through the walls and wipe out the entire Sassanid dynasty. But after the war, all the walls had been repaired, and the Arabs had even reinforced the original foundations of the Sassanids. Although Wang Chong's group had 200,000 soldiers, it was still far from enough to besiege a city. At Talas, Abu Muslim's 400,000 soldiers had spent 2 months attacking the city of Talas without being able to break through the defenses of the Anshi Protectorate army. Moreover, Wang Chong's current army was much smaller than Abu Muslim's. Haha, it seems like you're prepared to put up a stubborn resistance and fight to the death. Wang Chong faintly smiled, not at all surprised by Abu Muslim and Ziyad's reactions. Since that's the case, I'll fulfill your wish. On the walls of Khorasan, Abu Muslim and Ziyad widened their eyes at Wang Chong's words. The walls of Khorasan were extremely smooth, and the two of them did not believe that Wang Chong's soldiers could break them. But Wang Chong's confidence and ease were truly unsettling. Wang Chong, what do you mean? Ziyad couldn't help but say. Ha! Wang Chong faintly smiled, paying no attention to Ziyad. He had not brought his army here to exchange heartfelt thoughts with Abu Muslim and Ziyad. Great General Bahram, if you're ready, let's begin. Wang Chong turned his head to Bahram. Understood. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.